take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Living life in the fast lane, on and off the racetrack. They're world-class athletes. They're also investors, owners,
making the transition from player to owner is something that's very exciting to me.
And activists. The pandemic has changed the way we consume live sports. The intersection of sports, business, and technology has never been closer. Is the future of sports about real-world icons or avatars in the metaverse? Will crypto be the next frontier of sports betting? At the Bloomberg Power Players Miami Summit, we convene leading athletes, managers, and investors to map out the future of the billion-dollar global sports industry. This is the Bloomberg Power Players Miami Summit.
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg Quick Take Chief Correspondent Jason Kelly.
Good morning, good afternoon. You know, when you're in Miami, you lose all sense of time because it's sunny and all that. We are so happy to be here. Everybody needs to come on into the room because this thing is happening. As you can see, I'm Jason Kelly from Bloomberg, down from New York, as are the rest of my team. We're really excited to be here. Whether you're joining us here in Miami or virtually, welcome. What a moment to be in Miami. You drive around town in a fancy car or a non-fancy car, and you can just feel the energy of this place. Part of it's about the race, but part of it is about what's happening in this town. And we're going to get into that in all measures in just a few minutes. Alex Rodriguez and I are going to have a conversation in just a few minutes. He's the perfect person to kick off this program from a conversational perspective. We are here to talk about all matter of things, and so we did pull the Twitterverse. We're going to pull that up to ask about cryptocurrencies. Twitter, you might have heard of it. It's been in the news a little bit lately. Cryptocurrencies are here to stay. Where is the biggest growth area? So according to Twitter, very interesting to see institutional investors. That is the area that has the most interest, at least according to the folks on Twitter. Before we get started, just a couple of announcements. First, I definitely want to acknowledge Crypto.com, speaking of crypto, for sponsoring today's event. For our virtual attendees out there in the metaverse, the universe, if you experience any issues with audio or video quality, simple. Refresh your browser, turn your computer on and off. It always works. You can also use the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen for support. For today's event, we have partnered with Thyssen. It's an audio-to-text platform, that's cool technology, that's transcribing today's discussions in real time. That makes the event more accessible. You can access Thyssen for the real-time transcription via the link on your screen in the session description. We want to hear from you. We're going to be tweeting and Instagramming and TikToking and all that stuff. So please engage with us on social media. The hashtag is PowerPlayers. Thanks again for joining us. Let's get it started.
Please welcome to the stage Crypto.com Chief Marketing Officer, Stephen Kalifowitz.
Everybody, thank you so much for coming. We are so excited to be sponsoring this event. We've got an amazing group of people here, and it's just, like as was just said, this is a crazy weekend in Miami. The culmination of sport, of reinvigorating cities, and this city specifically becoming a crypto city, right? As we've seen, Mayor Suarez, who's going to be coming up later, is going to talk a bit about what he's been doing to reinvigorate this city. It's, this is a vision that we've had for over a year, and when we started talking to Bloomberg about, hey, we've got F1 Miami, we've got all this activity happening in Miami, let's bring together some amazing people who are going to be coming to this city for the race and actually think about, okay, what's going on in fintech? And how does crypto play a role? So I'm so excited to have you all here. There's an amazing group of people who are coming. I think we have close to 700 or 1,000 people who are RSVP'd coming in and out throughout the day. So definitely take advantage of the networking time that you have. And also, as was said, I had no influence over that Twitter poll, didn't know what was happening. But our institutional team is here because we have a whole new institutional offering and sales reps and people who can talk to you. So if you're an institutional customer who's been thinking about crypto and want to learn more about it, last year and what you saw in that video was very much about crypto and Crypto.com introducing ourselves to the world. This year is very much about introducing people to crypto specifically and how you can come in. So please take advantage of the networking time. Thank you again, and I can't wait to see what comes from this event. Enjoy Miami.
Please welcome to the stage A-Rod Corp Chairman and CEO, Alex Rodriguez, and Bloomberg's Jason Kelly.
Nice hometown reception for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome home. It's everybody's home now.
That's your coffee. It's cool to be here with you.
Likewise.
Thank you for doing this. What a weekend for Miami. Native son here, you're seeing it all play out. What does this weekend mean for Miami? What's the vibe right now?
Well, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. I've been here pretty much my whole entire life, and been through Super Bowls, Orange Bowl championship games, obviously the Miami Heat winning championships, multiple, the Marlins. Nothing has rocked this city like F1. I've never seen anything like it. And really in America, it's kind of foreign to us, but to tell you the power of today's day and age and content, I have a few girlfriends of mine who watch this Netflix deal, and they've become fanatical. They still haven't gone to a race, and they're paying thousands of dollars for these tickets.
Yeah.
Confusing.
Yeah. What you know a little bit about sports. What is it about this sport? And this is a sports town in a very serious way. You just name-checked a bunch of things. And it's not only professional sports, it's collegiate sports, obviously, with Miami leading the way, but also it's home to many former athletes like yourself. You obviously have deep roots, but Big Papi is here and many others. What is it about the sports culture here that is different?
I just think is in many ways is kind of a small gap. Like used to have New York and the Hamptons. Now you have New York and Miami.
Yeah.
And you're getting a lot of the good DNA from up north, the Northeast. When we used to come here to Miami, it was always sold out, and it was probably 80% Yankee fans. Similar with probably not as many Red Sox fans, but similar. But Miami is just a special town. It's a city of champions. If you're not a champion or champion-like, the people won't show up. There's too many things going on, not like Minnesota and Minneapolis where, there's a lot to do, but you have less options, right? Here, I have a daughter, they're 17 and 14. Their schedule is busier than mine. Mm-hmm. And I have to kind of pick my time and set an appointment to just see them now, right? So Miami is unique and still in the early stage of where it's going.
We're going to talk about Minneapolis in a second. It's not by accident that you mentioned that specific city because you own the NBA and the WNBA teams there. But before we get to that, I want to stay with Miami for a second because you and I got to spend some time together back in December for an excellent documentary we produced called Athlete Empire about Alex Rodriguez. You should check it out.
Shameless
Available
plug.
on YouTube.
Little plug.
Listen, I have the stage. I'm going to take it. But it was fascinating to see Miami through your eyes, especially through the eyes of not just someone who grew up here, who went to your high school, but we also went to several key real estate investments that you have, including in downtown Miami. And I remember being there with you on that roof and sort of looking across Miami. Real estate has been a huge driver of what's happened here. And yet, here we are at kind of an interesting moment in the real estate market. How do you see it right now?
Well, if you take a step back and you're a New Yorker and let's just say that you're an investment banker and you make $10 million a year. It's a lot of money. If you move to Miami with the savings, you can carry a $30 million mortgage and break even. So during COVID, a lot of people started, underwriting these numbers, right? And it made the obvious move. Obviously, then you can live and work anywhere you want. But I'll share some numbers with you, at least in our business at A-Rod Corp, how we see it. We underwrote an apartment building, 30 stories downtown. We underwrote our rent a little bit south of $2. We're getting almost $4 per foot. We just finished right here in Miami Beach, an A+ office building. We underwrote them at $45 a foot. With TIs, we're getting almost $100 a foot, no TIs concessions, and we have 50,000 square feet. We can rent out 500,000. So that was incredible. A lot of times it's better to be lucky than good. They just recently put 3 lots, sold as 1, in my old neighborhood in Lagos Island for $170 million. No house, that's just raw land. So those are the goods. Our firm is looking at this as forecasting some headwinds in the past. And what you have here is you have a shortage of schools, you have a shortage of infrastructure, right? It wasn't meant to that many people come at one time. You have a major shortage of, and I'll address this, affordable housing. And you certainly have a shortage of synagogues. It's funny, all my New York friends call me, they want 3 things. They want a good school, they want a good country club, and a synagogue. And I said, well, my friend Mitchell here, I said, listen, I can help you with 2 of the 3, I can't help you with the 3rd.
But I got a guy.
You always got a guy, I'm my partners. So that's good, but when you think about it, the affordable price is one that we all need to pay attention. And I know the mayor's gonna be here, I know it's one of, in his main kind of agenda to fix in the future. If you look at it, if you're a waiter or waitress, it's hard for you to get a 1-bedroom apartment. In order to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, you gotta make $72,000 a year at least, and most waiters and waitresses are not making that. But you should have 3x of your monthly income. So I'll break it down a little bit for you. So if you're a young person, you make $6,000 per month, you pay $1,500 in taxes, you have $4,500 left. Say you pay $500 for your car, you're down to $4,000. Then you pay your rent for $2,000, and you're left with $2,000. Now you got to go to the groceries, buy your pet some food. You got to get your hair done, nails, pedicure, manicure, and you have about $1,000 left. There's not a lot of room for not a lot of room for error. So those are the numbers a lot of young people are doing, and therefore they're going to start moving out. And we can't have our talent move out of town. We got to keep them in town.
And at the same time, Jay Powell's coming in with his friends. Rates are going up. How do you forecast that? You talked about some headwinds. I assume that's got to be part of it, is inflation, rising rates. Like, how do you factor that in? Because you are a you are an ambitious real estate investor.
Yeah, we own about 8,500 apartment units. We own about 9,000 single-family homes all over the Southeast, but specifically in Miami. The way we combat that, as a leader of our company, we always have to think about offense and defense, right? I have an offensive coordinator and I have a defensive coordinator. I'm spending a lot of time with my defensive coordinator right now, right? How do we hedge? How do we protect? We protect the portfolio with puts. We still want to play offense and get part of the ups, but we want to make sure we're very safe. It's a very interesting time right now. The way we fight it is two ways. Number one, with rates going up, our rents are going up. But more importantly, we're usually buyers, we're wholesale buyers, not retail buyers. So we're buying things, usually apartment units that are less than replacement cost. So we have an opportunity to grow, we're in the money, and there's a good time to be very patient and disciplined.
How do you see this playing out on the venture side of the business? Because you've been pretty ambitious on that side as well, you and your partner, Mark Laurie. Specifically, what are you seeing in terms of either new opportunities, both new opportunities to invest, but also to exit? How does that feel right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our company, we own probably over 40 companies in our portfolio. We took about 6 public last year. We were supposed to take 7 public this year. Maybe that number will be cut in half. The markets are wildly volatile right now, as you guys know. But here's what's happening. There's still a disconnect in the market. The sellers, if you're a seller, you still think your company's worth X. If I'm the buyer, I know it's worth X minus 50%, sometimes 80%. And we haven't met. That bridge is still very long. At some point, it's going to come together. Some of the founders are starting to get religion. I talk to them daily and weekly, and they're starting to get some religion that they're not worth what even their last round, right? So I think the key for us is we like companies that are growing 2X, 3X year over year. And even if you get say a company grows 3X 3 years in a row, that's 9X. If your company's down 80%, you still have a chance to kind of, uptake your next round. So it's a good time to be really disciplined. And look, we have a lot of serious and uncomfortable conversations with our founders, but we're always there to support and be a helpful hand.
So let's talk about your sports teams. This has been quite a year for you. You got into NBA ownership. I know it's a process that you're going through with the Taylors to take over. But you were there with a literal front row seat to see the T-Wolves make a nice run into the playoffs. Very exciting. A shift from playing to owning is an interesting one, to say the least. What surprised you about sort of seeing this organization from that perspective?
Well, I think a few things. Number one, sports. Look at sports as an anchor tenant to a retail center. Right? And the retail anchor is so important. So if you have Walmart and you own a retail center, it's going to make your retail center. Sports, you should look at it as an anchor to a media and entertainment platform. And there's so much that goes on 360 around the clock, not just during the season, but the draft. You see what content did to F1, right? It's storytelling. I think as an industry, the NBA does an incredible job of storytelling. NFL does too. I think baseball has a long ways to go. So what I learned from Mitchell Modell, my great friend, and one of our mentors, George Steinbrenner, I learned a great deal from him.
We've heard of him.
We've heard of him.
Yeah.
I've heard of him too. Talk about uncomfortable conversations. Oh, man. Why am I reading about you on page 6? Oh. I talk over the weekend. It's Shabbat Shalom today. No, oh God. Mitch, you remember those days? Hal is much easier to have conversations with Hal. Hal was very sweet, friendly. No, I think, look, when you look at the Timberwolves, we look at, I get this from John Gray, we like to buy in great neighborhoods. And ideally, we like to buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. And not saying that the Timberwolves were the worst house, but we definitely have opportunities to have tremendous upside. And, we were talking about earlier, I think that in the next 10, 15, 20 years, you won't be able to buy an NFL or an NBA franchise less of $5 billion. And why this has been driven by TV ratings, gaming is an international sport, tremendous growth, incredible leadership with Adam Silver and Mark Tatum. So there's a lot of good things and globally, I'm more bullish about the NBA than I am about the NFL. Maybe not domestically, because NFL's king with fantasy football, and I mean, everyone watches football on Sundays. But if you look at the numbers in the NBA, they've been fantastic. But going back to the Timberwolves, Jason, last year we won 23 games. We won 46 this year. We had 17 sellouts, up from like 3 or 4. And our TV ratings are up about 52%. We have a really exciting team. We have a young kid by the name of Anthony Edwards, who's 20 years old, who could be the next thing, whether it's Wade or LeBron or Jordan. Anything in that bucket would be really, really great. And we're excited about the next chapter. But in order to win a championship, you mentioned the run, the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life is win a world championship. There's so much sacrifice. And in 2004, I was called the big choker. And Mitchell, you remember, and I thought that was a little unfair because at the end of the day, you win with a team and you lose with a team. But I was the guy they brought in from Texas. Steinbrenner brought me in. We were up 3-0, and we had this incredible debacle, and we lost 4 in a row. It was like never been done before, and I was part of that. But the reason why is to be a champion, you need talent, you need passion and grit, but then you need poise and discipline. And the last two, you can't have a shortcut. You got to have time, you got to have reps, and that's what our team needs. And in the future, we'll be more prepared when our time comes.
So just staying with sports franchises for a second, because I look at the headlines as I know you do. Chelsea's going to trade, it looks like, to an American owner, Todd Boehly. He's in exclusive talks there. The Broncos are narrowing down in the NFL. When you look at that, and I go back to the comment you made about $5 billion, I mean, it's mind-boggling the value of these franchises. You went through a very public process where you came in second to buy the Mets. Tell me more about how you see ownership and valuations evolving. Dig into that $5 billion a little bit for me.
Yeah, Jason, when you look at it, we talked about great neighborhoods, right? And I just love that because it's pretty simple. We all are part of a neighborhood. Sports was just sports. I think people now are understanding when you see what Josh Harris and Blitz are going with their entertainment media platform, and they're buying a collection of teams. It's just a holding company. And under that holding company, we have Minnesota Timberwolves, we have the Lynx, we have our media, we have our venture, right? We have our real estate, which is all around the real estate. So there's so many businesses under the sports. Of course, the team gets the headlines, but it's an incredible anchor and an octopus of opportunities that comes in. Back in the late 70s and 80s, remember, late 70s, teams were traded for $15 million. And you didn't have groups. It was just usually a wealthy family. I remember Jerry Reinsdorf said, I bought both teams, I couldn't afford them. Jerry Buss, the same thing with the Lakers. And they make things happen. They go to their banks, they got to grind like hell. Today, if you look at the ownerships, it's really, really white glove blue chips. The Waltons are all over and probably the favorite to buy the Broncos. That number trade probably for $4.5 billion or so. And they're already in because the Kroenke, who owns the Denver Nuggets and the Rams, is married to a Walton. So it's always good to have an inside track. Right? So
you came to play today. I appreciate that.
No, I actually need some sleep. I worked out. I'm too dizzy. I'm about to faint. I need some water, but they worked my ass butt hard today. So when you think about Waltons, you look at Steve Ballmer from Microsoft, you look at Mark Cuban, you have all, Kroenke and Crafts. These are all blue chip names that are titans in the world of business and now are running these franchises so great. Look at the Atlanta Braves, Greg and John Malone, they just won a world championship. Greg will talk here after me for the main event, and they own F1. And again, tremendous leadership. It always goes back to the people, and they got the right people.
I appreciate the shout out to my Atlanta Braves. It's very nice. Speaking of baseball, I tuned in on Sunday, and there you were, the K-Rod broadcast. So you shifted, which is very interesting because we talked about this when we met up at the end of last year, and it was clear you were sort of rethinking your broadcast strategy. For those of you who don't know, you can tune in. It's not every Sunday.
No, 8 Sundays.
8 Sundays. For the K-Rod broadcast. You and Michael K, you're in one place, but you're watching the game.
Right.
It's similar to the Manning cast.
Yeah.
Same general idea. This past Sunday, Keith Hernandez comes in like your crazy uncle, like big on the screen. His cat's in the background. Tell me about your choice to do that, and also as both a participant and a consumer of media, what that's taught you about where we may be going.
Well, Jimmy Patero, who runs ESPN, I was very honest, and I said, I can't do 30 Sundays. It's you got to travel on Saturday. You get there on Sunday. You're off on Monday. I have a daughter who's going to be a senior next year. I have a daughter who's going to be a freshman next year. Between the Timberwolves and running our firm, I mean, my bandwidth, I couldn't do 30. So he said, he kind of gave me an open format to say, what do you want to do? I said, well, I can probably do 8 to 10 Sundays. And if I can do it with my best buddy, my good buddy, Michael Kay, and he said, fine. So K-Rod, in many ways, I think could be a future of how games are watched and telecasted. We basically sit on a couch like this, we're watching the game, and I think is even a better format for baseball than football because you have all this downtime. So it allows us to have fun. I mean, we were interviewing Keith Hernandez. I was like a little kid. He was my favorite player of all times. He literally had his face like, older people stuck in the thing. And I was like, I wanted to tell Keith to back up a little bit. Then he brings this cat who's had for 19 years and starts petting him. And then we're talking about nightlife in New York City and where he would take me if we were all, going to have a good time with the 84, 85 Mets. And if you haven't seen the documentary, watch it on ESPN. But yeah, and then I get to be Vanna White. I get to go to the wall and explain, like, if I was commissioner, for the year, what would I do? And I explained the Aaron Judge contracts and the dynamics of it. So it gives you, and I've had, Mitch, I don't know if you've watched or read, but a lot of people have reached back and go, I'm actually enjoying it more than I thought.
Right.
And it's just because we get to be ourselves.
And so what is that as an investor? Then you must look at that and say, all right, so that's an interesting live sports product. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked before about sort of synchronous versus asynchronous in terms of on-demand versus live. Sports is obviously very interesting to you, but you also think about media. You've already alluded to the fact that media is a key part of valuing sports franchises. What does it tell you about kind of the future of media in some ways? Because you're also very active on social media, thanks to your daughters.
Yeah,
probably.
I mean, think about it. I mean, we're watching a baseball game, we're watching the Mets, and we're watching the Phillies. We're talking about Steve Cohen and having one of the richest owners in sports, but one of the richest as far as deploying capital in analytics. But what he did differently is he also brought in Buck Showalter, who is a savant and is an old school guy, reminds me of Nick Saban. So the combination of analytics and old school, I think, is just perfect. But when you think about media, and you look at the numbers, everyone thought, oh man, LeBron is not in the postseason, NBA is gonna go down. The ratings have never been better, right? And it allows others, guys like Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards from our team. You look at Luka from the Mavericks. I mean, the talent is phenomenal. And here's the thing, what's your name? Yeah. Dean. If Dean and I go to Minnesota Timberwolves, we sit half court, right on my seats, and tip off to 7:05. We're ordering a steak and a glass of wine, right? By 9:15, right? Now, if you look at baseball, 9:15, you're probably at the top of the second inning.
Yeah.
Which makes it challenging. So
just as we start to wind down a little bit, you have really shifted dramatically into your role as a businessman, an owner, investor. What's sort of top of mind when you sit around the table in Coral Gables with your team? You've recruited a really interesting and impressive roster of people. What's top of the agenda right now when it comes to deals that are out there, concerns that you have? Take us inside the boardroom.
There's so much information. My mentor, Warren Buffett, told me, the reason why I live in Omaha is I don't need to be in New York with all the information, all the noise. Well, like today, you don't have a choice because it comes at you, your phone and your iPad, and it's everywhere. But I think for us, and the difference between in sports being a champion or not, is just discipline and being quiet in the moment. Look, we're all going to get a Mike Tyson punch in our life. At some point, we're all going to get it. And if you haven't gotten it, get ready because it's coming. Right? You just got it. You got to be able to take the hit and stay calm and stay cool and be positive and think before you talk. I mean, these are the conversations I have with my daughters at home. Every night, no phones, no electronics. We're going to sit and talk. We have breakfast club, 9:30 every Saturday from 8:30 to 10. No electronics, old school conversations. They hate it at first. They love it now. So for parents, if you want to do a little breakfast club, it's been an incredible investment for me and my girls. but really doubling down on our core businesses. That means real estate. For the first time in over 5 years, we're going to go to the market, raise a little capital for our real estate. We've already bought about $1 billion of multifamily apartments, and we're going to go out and attack it pretty hard again. But really focusing and doubling down on our winners and trying to spend 90% of our time in what brings us 90% of our returns. And I've been where I'm doing it opposite, and that's frustrating.
When you look at the broader world, geopolitically, but also politically, here in Florida, here in Miami, a lot of landmines out there. What do you worry about from that perspective?
Well, look, I think it's funny. We had John McEnroe and Patrick on our show the other day at K-Rod, and they're talking about world politics, and they're talking about art, and they're talking about sports and tennis. I mean, so that was so great to have such a 360 conversation. I just think as an industry, we have to be careful. I mean, we have this this cancel culture, and it triggers young people to do silly things. We're going to end up losing our most talented people because they didn't say the right thing or they weren't proper. And we just got to take a breath, man. I mean, be good to humans. People are going to make mistakes. Because you say something doesn't mean you're racist. Because you say this doesn't mean that. Like, let's give each other a break. And people are just like waiting. People are watching me right now to see if I screw something up. And it might be a funny joke, but they want to cancel somebody. So I have great sympathy for those. There's a lot of good people. And I think as a result, you give young people power to do silly things and bring people down. And you just got to be careful with that. There's too many good things going on.
Do you worry locally that politics could overwhelm and deter some of the growth that's happening here?
I worry that politics can screw everything up everywhere. I do. I think the pendulum's gone too far to the right, and it makes me sad that you have all these things that you can't talk to this person because he's red, or can't talk to this person because he's blue. I won't go to that hotel because it's owned by a red. It's crazy. And at the end of the day, we're all red, white, and blue. We're all part of the greatest country in the world. And we see what's happened in Russia and Ukraine and all this nonsense. And we just went through one of the world's biggest world pandemics. And we're still trying to fight at each other instead of, love each other. And I just think we need a little bit more love, a little bit more passion, and a little bit more patience.
All right, best advice that you can give this audience in 1 minute. You've learned a lot over the years.
Don't listen to anything I say. No, I would just, it's what I tell my daughters, it's about overcoming adversity. People talk about my great, accomplishments in life, in winning the championship in '09 and doing some great things. The thing I'm most proud of is being a father, and I'm 5th all time in the history of the game. 5th, Rachel, 5th, right? All time in the history of strikeouts. That means I have a PhD in failing. It also means that only 4 people in the history of mankind have struck out more than me. But I also tell my girls that I have a master's in getting back up. And that's the key in life. You're gonna get knocked down, you gotta get up, you gotta dust off and have positive, take time for yourselves, take a little time for yoga and Zen, and turn on Fox News or CNBC or CNN for a minute and put Instagram away, put the phones away, and let's connect in old school conversations. Because I miss it. And I'm sure some of you guys missed it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome to the stage, Liberty Media Corporation President and CEO Greg Maffei and Bloomberg's Ed Hammond.
I guess we just start. I think we're just going to start. A lot of movement still, but let's get going. So Greg, obviously you're the reason, I would say probably most of us are here, bringing the F1 series to here to the city of Miami. So congratulations, first of all, on putting on what I'm sure is going to be a fantastic weekend.
Thank you.
As I think about it, there are a lot of different ways F1 wins this weekend, obviously for the drivers, the teams, the fans, the city itself. What does success look like for the owner of the product as this weekend unfolds?
Well, I think it's a huge win for Formula One in many ways, starting with the fans, the chance to get to show them what's going to be an awesome track, an awesome experience out there at the Hard Rock Stadium. Our partners, the Miami Dolphins and Tom Garfinkel, have built a great experience. I think that'll be the first place it's a win. I think it's a win that the track is going to be interesting for racing. It's a highly abrasive surface. They used a natural recycled product. It's going to be highly abrasive on the tires, so there's going to be a lot of tire strategy involved and figuring out how long you can go on softs, mediums, hards. So that'll be interesting, keep it competitive. For us as an economic proposition, Miami's a great showcase. We really invested and bought Formula One on the basis that there was enormous opportunity in the United States. The Austin race has gone from being something that had a hard time selling 80,000 tickets a few years back to doing over 400,000 this past October. But Miami is going to be a whole nother level of showcase, going to be a whole other level of excitement. And I think you're going to see that exhibited both in the TV audience and in the general level of interest. The number of articles that have come out about the event, the number of articles that have come out about where Formula One is going. It's even the cover of Business Week Bloomberg, or is it Bloomberg Business Week? I never remember this week. So
Bloomberg Business Week.
So I got the order right.
But you're right. A lot of press has come out around the event, but not all of it positive. There has been some criticism from people within F1 or I suppose outside F1 now, formerly CEO Bernie Ecclestone, saying that you're risking the sort of purity and the traditions of the sport by overly Americanizing it. Is that fair?
Bernie has to say something. If any of you know Bernie, they know that's how he operates. Look, Bernie deserves massive credit for building the sport. He built an enormous juggernaut, but the reality is it didn't move forward in our judgment over the last few years, and the audience was stalled. Bernie's line was, I like old rich white guys to pay for the sport, and our view has been that there's an opportunity to be much broader, to bring in gender diversity, to bring in age diversity, and I think that's worked out well. And I'm willing to take Bernie's criticism.
Okay, but he was an economic animal. The US always existed. There have always been petrol heads here. They tried and failed quite spectacularly to crack the US market under the previous ownership. So what is it this time that you guys are doing differently? How have you tweaked, dare I say, the Formula or Formula One to make sure that the US is a success this time around?
Well, I think the numbers speak for themselves. As I said, we went over 400,000, which was the largest Grand Prix in history last October. This will be over 300,000, and frankly, they really, our partners constrained the audience and constrained the attendance because they want to make sure they got it right in the first year. I suspect it'll be bigger in future years. There clearly was more demand. And now we've launched Las Vegas to a lot of acclaim, which will start in November of 23. What did we do differently? I think we've invested. Maybe it helps that we are an American company, but we've invested the time in building out a great experience. We've done a lot to try and open the sport up. It used to be a fairly closed sport, very little containment, very little product was released. Now we have, we're the fastest growing sport on social media. We've had fan experiences. For example, a few years back, we had the cars drive through Trafalgar Square and attract 100,000 people to come see it in London. Of course, the drivers were supposed to just drive around passively around Nelson, and they all did donuts. So it was, that kind of stuff is natural and what you want to see. We've seen, obviously, the growth of things by opening up, like the Netflix Drive to Survive series, has caused us to expand the audience. And I'd like to hear fans, thank you. All of those things have been a big positive. And consequently, as I mentioned, while at a time when other sports are aging, we can show by surveys that we've not only increased the gender, we've increased the average, or brought down rather, the average age of our audience in 3 years by 4 years, which is a huge accomplishment. And we're seeing massive increases in the viewership here in the United States, up 50% year over year, and then again another 20% this year. So in a time when a lot of sports, because of the changing nature of sports on television, are having declines, we're having quite the opposite.
How do you balance that sort of purity that I alluded to, and whatever Mr. Eccleston may or may not say, there is an aspect of the sport that has always been about being at the very pinnacle of motor racing, and therefore it has this sort of mystique, and to some extent that was maintained by being inaccessible. So how do you preserve that and then at the same time do what you were just talking about in terms of opening the sport up to a broader audience by making it accessible?
Well, I think we still have those high-end experiences. If any of you bought the Carbone dinner, or any of you are trying to go to the Paddock Club or the Palm Club, it's not exactly a low-end experience here, nor at anywhere else. But we've also created opportunities for fans, both on television, streamed, or in other ways, to get the experience. And I think we've maintained that pretty well. Really, I think we tried to do a bunch of things which not only democratize the sport in that sense and opened it up, but we've tried to create a more interesting experience for the viewership. If you look at how the television has changed over the last few years, I think Sky does a very good job. I give them a lot of credit. And that's moved a lot over the last 5 years. If any of you watch the Indy 500, and I'm certainly not biased against it because actually we were investors and owners of the team that won the Indy 500 last year, but look at the difference in the coverage and how strong the F1 coverage is versus the Indy 500 coverage. I think you'd walk away thinking the F1 experience on television is a way better experience. We've done things to try and make the sport more competitive. The Concord Agreement is the relationship we have with the 10 teams, and we instituted a new Concord Agreement this year. It had, I think, 4 big elements which are going to make a better product over the long term. The first of those is we put in a cost cap. You had teams spending as much as $450 million and teams spending $125 million. And guess what? The $425 million team, in this case, Mercedes, won for 8 years in a row, 7 years in a row. Constructor 8, Driver Championship 7. That's changed. Now this cost cap, much more competitive. 2, we have a new design. These cars create massive downforce. Hugging the track allows them to do unbelievable things in terms of performance, but throw off a horrible amount of dirty air, meaning if you get behind one of these things, your ability to overtake is massively destroyed, limited, and very tough. The new car designs have less bad flow off the back, create an easier chance to overtake, and you've already seen some of the great racing that we've had where back and forth, which really had not happened over the last few years. Third, we leveled out how some of the money gets paid out. So we have a couple of big sources of revenue: broadcast, promoter fees, which is ticketing from people like our friends at the Dolphins, and advertising and sponsorship, some ancillary things like the Paddock Club hospitality. We collect all that revenue, we split it with the teams. And that was heavily stacked towards the winning team and towards some historical relationships like Ferrari got a big bonus. We've tried to level that out so that the midfield and lesser teams have a better chance to be competitive. And the last thing we did is we created them as franchises. So historically, there had been as many as 15 or 20 teams on the grid. They got down to 10. Right when we entered the sport, Manor, which was the 11th team, went into receivership, the UK equivalent of bankruptcy, and got sold for £1. Now the bottom team, because they're all locked in as franchises, is worth $400 million minimum, maybe more. And I think you're seeing numbers discussed as much as $1 billion for a team or $2 billion for a team. That attracted investment, that attracted interest. Again, make the bottom teams, the second and third tier teams, more competitive. So I think we're just at the beginning of seeing that happen this year. You've seen Haas, which was the laggard, do quite well this year. You've seen Ferrari come back. A lot of excitement and a lot more mystery to what's going to happen on a weekend, a lot more excitement about who's going to overtake and where. So all 4 of those things, I think, set up well to increase our fan interest as the years go forward.
Will we see the expansion from 20 teams up to, I think it's 23 has been talked about as a possibility? No,
you're saying, let's not confuse, there are 23 races, there are 10 teams, 20 cars.
Sorry, 10 teams.
Yeah. Right. There's a potential that we may increase the teams over time. I don't think it's a pressing need. There are a lot of people who would like us to do it. Most of them want to buy in, but we have not felt that need. In some cases, there are actually problems. The paddocks, the garages, there's some places that really don't have more than 10 garages. So there are challenges literally around the dynamics of putting an 11th team on the track.
Obviously, the deal that you signed here with ESPN a few years ago, which has been rumored to be worth around $5 million a year is going to end this year. As you talk about the popularity of the sport and how much that's increased and how much the sort of the television product, if you like, has improved, what are you thinking in terms of where that deal could go? I mean, could this be a $100 million a year brand? Could it be bigger than that? What's the sort of analog we should look at for F1?
Well, that's a good kind of number. We'll see how it goes. We're going to see a massive increase. Again, we're one of the few sports that's had this explosion in audience. And we were historically very under-monetized, historically cheap. We'd like to be less cheap. We'd like to obviously provide good value to our broadcast partners, but I think there's a real opportunity to see that increase.
And what does that look like? Would you consider going over the sort of, when I think about, I guess, the options there, you could go down the traditional TV route, which will give you more eyeballs, but perhaps a lower check on the way in, or you could do something more like what boxing has done, where you go to an over-the-top product, which might give you a very, very good amount of money coming into it, but potentially lose you some of those eyeballs longer term.
Look, we own a baseball team, pretty successful one, so we pay attention to the breadth and making sure as wide an audience can see your product, and that's true for all sports. It's particularly acute here because we have a big advertising and sponsorship component. So Heineken and Rolex and the like, they want to make sure we're not on a narrow cast way as well. It is interesting how the world fragmenting, you think about cable households and how many there are, and then compare now with how many Netflix households and how many Prime households. The idea that the broadest audience was historically on television or on cable, that's becoming a lot less clear. And if you look at the trend lines over the next 5 years, that's going to be a lot less clear. Those lines are going to cross. We come from cable as our history. We watch that well, but that's not where the growth is today in terms of video.
Would Netflix be a logical buyer for the content, bearing in mind the success that they have had with Drive to Survive?
You'll have to talk to Reed and Ted. Reed has made the smarty line that he wished he'd bought the company. We'll see if he gets a chance to just rent the product, but we'll see.
I did mention the potential to increase the number of races on the calendar. Obviously, you're now going to have 3 in the US, which is unprecedented. No other country has more than 2 currently. Which other markets might you look at in terms of expanding the sport with the race?
Look, I think we have a careful balance. We have a lot of demand from a lot of places. We are truly a global sport. The one continent where we are not operating, put aside Antarctica, is Africa, and we've looked hard at Johannesburg, and I think that's a real potential till we could be on every continent, and a lot of reasons to be there. I know Lewis Hamilton would love us to get to Africa, and Lewis is our biggest star, so we certainly listen. But there's also demand more demand in Latin America. There's more demand in Asia, and then the historical European races fight for their position on the calendar as well. So this is a somewhat of a balancing act between your historical audience, trying to make sure they're happy, tracks with a lot of iconic history, and new tracks where in some cases we're getting better economic deals, and we're also opening up a new fan base.
Talk to me a little bit about the decision to keep racing in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, there is a lot of controversy surrounding that country. There have been accusations of sports washing around other sporting events there. You already have the Middle East with the Bahrain Grand Prix, so I wonder, why stay there? What's the decision that sort of drives that?
Well, it's not always easy to choose the politics of the places where you race. We have people who are not very pleased that we're racing in China. They weren't pleased that we were racing in Russia before we pulled the race, obviously, after the Ukraine incident. There are people who are not pleased we're racing in Bahrain. And there are people, frankly, who are displeased we're racing in America, tweeting about Roe v. Wade being overturned. So we are never going to satisfy all of the interests, political interests of everybody there. I think the Saudi, my estimation, Saudi is a society that can improve like many others, and they're actually making some progress in good ways.
You mentioned some people not delighted that you're racing in America. I mean, look, Miami, Florida, I should say, generally has been through some issues itself recently with the bill that was passed, the Parental Rights in Education bill, and obviously Disney have been sort of foremost in being caught up in that as a company. Has that impacted at all the decision to hold a race here, or the decision to potentially hold the race here in future years?
Fortunately, no one has ever asked me the question. You're the first person to mention.
Well, that's good. We get the exclusive answer.
Yeah. As I said, no one's ever asked me the question. I don't feel the need to answer. So it's.
I think it's a fair question, isn't it, for a media company holding an event in Florida at this time? Such a big and prominent event?
Yeah, I really don't think that's, again, if we responded to every political complaint that went on, we'd race nowhere. Norway maybe. Everybody happy with Norway?
I'm sure they have their own issues as well. You mentioned Lewis Hamilton as being the biggest star. Obviously, there were some complexities, let's say, to how the season was decided last year. How concerning was it for you as the owner of the F1 brand when it looked like he may not return to the sport and he took a sort of hiatus from even discussing his future in it?
Well, I consider Lewis a friend, somebody I have a lot of respect for. I can understand why he was as shaken by what happened and why he was as disappointed. And, Lewis endures, as many athletes do, a lot of scrutiny and a lot of second guessing and a lot of spotlight. And so I think his chance to go and, revitalize himself in private was well deserved. Would I have preferred a race where there was no controversy, there was no issue in terms of how it was decided? Absolutely. I watch a lot of sporting events and I see controversy about calls quite frequently, and this was, I think, sort of the same.
In terms of growing the sport, obviously, when I think about sort of taking eyeballs in a sport, often it's taken from other sports. Where do you see F1 going in terms of market share? Is it after other motorsports? Is it after some of the bigger traditional sports in the US? Or what do you sort of dig into to actually get those new viewers interested?
Well, I'm not sure, we're starting from a relatively small base. I'm not sure we're taking share so much from other sports. There has been a hole, you could argue. I mean, NASCAR was massively hot several years ago and has not been as hot recently. I don't think we're taking share from them, but maybe there was a latent audience that was interested in motor racing. But I really think when you look at these younger viewers who really had our growth, we may be, taking share from TikTok. I don't know. We're not. I don't think we're really stealing a lot of market share out there yet.
So we put a Twitter poll out there, which Bloomberg did this, I should say, which asked the question: what is the best way for Formula One to continue to grow its US fan base? And 39% of people said it was to attract Gen Z fans. 46% said more races in the US, and 14%, I should say, said increase the number of teams. I think we've talked about increasing the teams. We've certainly talked about having more races in the US. But talk to me about the Gen Z fans and how you
Did you offer them these choices?
I believe they were offered these choices.
So if you put up 3 choices, somebody's going to choose all of them, right? I think we've already done 1 and 2. Now, is there more we can do? Absolutely. Not more races in the US, but we're going to have a 3rd race, so we're on that one. Gen Z fans, I think things like Netflix, the esports we do, the social media we do, all of that has been a big factor in growing our Gen Z base. And actually, that is probably where we've grown faster than anybody else recently. So actually, I think that part's going okay. Increase the number of teams. I honestly think that's probably an American team that did well, American driver that did well, American OEM, all those would be interesting. But just another team, random, put an 11th team in, I don't think that's going to add a lot to the audience per se.
What can you do as owners to actually try and encourage that, to try and encourage, as you say, whether it's a US driver, team, OEM, how do you get them more into the sport? Because presumably that would help boost things over here.
So, look, the reason why these drivers are so good and why it's hard to imagine someone just getting in one of these cars is, I was with David Coulthard on another panel. He was a driver from the 90s and 2000s who, very amusing character. But he said he started karting at 3. And, what we have kids throwing a football or perhaps a baseball, maybe now they're picking up a lacrosse stick. These kids are in motor carts for racing at 5 and 6. And we don't have that program here in the United States. Now we've started it, and the teams have started it, and I credit, for example, Red Bull has a big program to try and grow younger drivers. But we just don't have that depth in the U.S. And as you know, someone once said, if you start with 10,000 kids at the top and pour them through, you're going to kick out one. So when we have 10,000, starting at 5, our chances to get one. Well, we don't have near 10,000, not starting at 5. But that's what will build a U.S. driver base. And the other reality is it's only 20 drivers, so it's not a huge. You're not talking about the 1,000 baseball players there are, right?
Is there any, I suppose, possibility for a U.S. team to come over from some of the other U.S. open wheel sports, Indy or whatever else, or are they just not competitive in the same way?
Look, you get a diversity of opinion. I think you could get a U.S. team, and that's true. Would one of those drivers translate across? There's a diversity of opinion. Some people think that some of those drivers would be great. Other people are less sure.
Just moving away from F1 before we wrap up, you're one of the few businesses left that have a special purpose acquisition company undeployed, which is pretty good because the market has obviously been so bad recently that the opportunities presumably are a lot better now in terms of cheaper assets. What can we expect there? Where are you sort of looking with that SPAC?
Look, our experience, our strength historically has been in a lot of subscription businesses, a lot of consumer-facing brands, a lot of experiential things. Remember, we're a big shareholder in Live Nation, Ticketmaster. We own the Braves. We own Formula One. We think we have knowledge of that experience, and there's probably some opportunity to cross-promote and do things which are positive. But we'll see. You're in a world where the markets have crashed in a lot of places, but the expectations of sellers may not have moved as quickly. So we'll see if those two things come together and we can get something done.
Can we see you do something in esports?
I think esports is very interesting. We do have entrants. For example, as I said, Formula One has a big esports component. We've done some other things. We're a small investor, not exactly, but in the drone racing league. So we've done some different things. They're not scale big businesses to date. So we tend to try and do something larger that'll move the needle. That would be the SPAC alternative. Our SPAC is pretty big for a SPAC. So the opportunity has to be a pretty big opportunity relatively.
We'll watch this space. We will keep checking in on it and see where it gets to. Greg Maffei, great conversation. Thank you so much for
Thank you for your interest in Formula One.
Please welcome to the stage Miami Mayor, the Honorable Francis Suarez, and Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabisaja.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Saying hi to Greg on the way out there.
Greg Maffei, I know, your buddy. I mean, I can feel the energy here.
We made it up the shaky stairs.
We made it up the stairs. I can feel the energy in Miami.
No incident.
How are you feeling, Mr. Mayor? This weekend is huge for you.
Wow. It's really hard to put into words to articulate how special this moment is. It's really the icing on the cake on 24 months of hypersonic growth that we've seen here in Miami, where we have attracted $2 trillion in assets under management companies in the last 18 months. We've grown our VC pipeline by 200%. And to put that number in context, if it were a zero-sum game and we would grow at the same rate for 2 more years, we'd actually overtake San Francisco as the venture capital of the United States and of the world. So it's been just great to be number one in tech job growth, number one in tech job migration, have an unemployment rate of 1.4%, being the happiest city in America, the healthiest city in America, number one in pandemic recovery, Financial Times designating us as the most important city in America. Yeah, you can clap for that. I think it's worthy of a clap. And I think for me, what's most important is I was born here. I was born and raised here, and I love this city. And I walk with this city in my soul and in my heart. And when I see us reach these kind of heights, it just makes me feel so special. And I think we're now a beacon of hope for not only America, but for the world. And we're seeing everybody in the world converge on Miami this weekend. So I'm very grateful to be here with you.
Why is Miami the right city for this event? I mean, you go anywhere in Miami today, you see F1, there's so much promo everywhere. But talk to us about the process of actually getting F1 here.
I think it has to do with the sort of macro disruptions that we're seeing in the world. You have a tri or quad generational disruption in the metamorphosis from the Industrial Revolution to the digital economy. And then you have that combined with a generational disruption from the boomer generation to the next generation. So the fact that those two things are happening at the same time, and Miami has leaned into that, what I call a tsunami of opportunity, has helped us reposition the center of gravity of the country in private equity and venture capital from New York and Silicon Valley to Miami. It's been a Flymo effect, right? A flywheel plus fear of missing out combined. I call it Flymo effect.
Did you just make that up?
I did.
Okay.
But I think all the convergence of that, which by the way has garnered not just the attention of the country, but of the Middle East and us being sort of the epicenter of 5 major markets in New York, California, South America, the Middle East, and Europe, creates this incredible confluence of factors that are conspiring in our favor. And Formula One is the perfect sort of convener for this moment worldwide.
Where does crypto fit into that? Because a lot of people call you the crypto mayor sometimes.
I don't mind that.
Often, I know you don't mind.
Yeah.
I live in New York, where New York Mayor Eric Adams is also trying to be the crypto mayor.
He's trying.
Crypto capital. Yeah, you guys kind of have a little rivalry going. What's the status of this rivalry?
Well, the status of the rivalry is I'm first and he's second.
Why?
Well, first of all, he's my friend. He's a great guy. I'll tell you, I met him when he was the nominee. He had not been mayor-elect. And I found it incredibly, I think one of the big things about him was he came to Miami before he was mayor to find out what we were doing and why we were being successful and why so many New Yorkers were coming to Miami. And I thought, first of all, that was incredibly humble of him. And second of all, I was wowed. This is the mayor of New York, or the presumptive mayor of New York, coming down here to learn about what we're doing. And I don't know how many of you have actually interacted with him or have met him. Eric is the kind of guy that when he walks into a room, he has a huge smile, and the smile kind of disarms you, and it kind of calms you. So we hit it off from day one. I did not have the same relationship with his predecessor that I have with him. And I think it's a friendly rivalry born out of friendship and a desire, frankly, as I'm now president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, so I'm president of all the mayors in the country. And my job now is not just to be the mayor of Miami, but to try to find our formula for success and scale it nationally to cities like New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, and others that maybe are struggling a little bit right now.
What does that look like, though, especially when you talk about crypto investment? Because right now, Miami is 5th to a lot of other cities in this nation in terms of crypto investment. So what does that look like in your opinion?
Well, there's I don't know if you ever heard of the saying, there's statistics, and then there's damn liars or something like that. I forget exactly how that saying goes, but we may be number 5 from maybe an aggregate investment perspective, but we're number 1 in the growth of our venture capital percentage, right? We've grown 2,000% in crypto investments year over year. We're number 1. I think number 2 is about 400% increase, and it may be New York. But I think for us, crypto was the slingshot in the David and Goliath story, right? If we are competing with someone who is bigger and stronger, we have to be smarter. So that was our hack on how we were going to become prominent in a increasingly technological world and ecosystem. And so having had experience with blockchain technologies, being on the Blockchain Foundation and being on the blockchain task force of the state of Florida, I knew the technology. I had a background in finance, and my dad's an engineer, sort of an engineering family. And so I understood the technology at a fundamental level, and I realized that I wasn't taking risks that I felt were inordinate. And obviously, many people across the country that were public officials didn't fully understand the technology, didn't fully understand why it was something that was important. But I'll finish by saying this. I was recently on a national business television show, and an older commentator, I won't say which one because it's kind of a rival to Bloomberg, asked me, he said, Mr. Mayor, and I cannot imitate his British accent. So maybe that'll give you
Not today.
a clue of who it is. He said, Mr. Mayor, I don't understand this crypto thing. And I said, let me give it to you in terms you can understand. So a company called FTX spent $200 million naming our arena. I said, we just got the Bitcoin conference from LA. That's 50,000 attendees and tens of millions of economic development dollars, right? And then I said, we've gotten all these exchanges and funds to come over and companies to come over, creating hundreds of $100,000 jobs. I said, do you understand it now? And he said, I get it. So it's an ecosystem.
It's slowly working. I want to bring up a Twitter poll because we love Twitter polls here at Bloomberg. Cool. And specifically when we talk about digital innovation and crypto investment, this is what our poll said. In order for Miami to become the hub, accept crypto everywhere, attract top tech talent and business and tax incentives. Where are we seeing crypto being accepted, really? I mean, are the Miami residents using crypto in the way that you're sort of envisioning?
Well, I think last year was what I call the year of mainstreaming. In other words, the year where people all understood at some level or another what crypto was, right? And and I say that this year, and we're we're in May now, right? Should be the year of utility. Right, and it should be accepting crypto everywhere. It should also be applications on the blockchain. And so I agree with that. The people who responded in that poll, I think that's the easiest way for crypto to be a bigger part of our lives is for it to sort of metamorphosize or transition from being something that we now know about to being something that we now use on a daily basis.
Is it happening now? I mean, when you look at something like Miami Coin, right, that hasn't been doing as well as I think you'd hoped.
So there's two things. I was layered two questions there. So is it happening? The answer I think is to the is it happening question is yes, it is happening. I recently saw a story, and I forget what the publication was, about people that were buying yachts in crypto, buying homes in crypto. So yes, it is happening. The Miami Coin project is a different project, and it was created by a company called City Coin, which is unaffiliated with any city. They've now created, I think, New York Coin and also an Austin Coin. Yep. And I think the idea of Miami Coin was a good idea, or New York Coin or Austin Coin, right? Which is that you can create a cryptocurrency that will derive a benefit or create a benefit for the cities, right? And then you have this decentralized autonomous community that can opine on how to use those funds that are created as a result of that benefit. In the city of Miami, it's created about $15 million in benefits, $5 million of which we use as a rent stabilization fund. I was, like I said, with the mayor of Austin, New York, and Denver this week in LA. And we're seeing 50% increases in rents in all four of those cities.
Including Miami.
Including Miami, right, including us. So we used it to help with that issue. I think, and I've said publicly, that I think the tokenomics of Miami Coin are off. And I think it seems like the OK Coin, which is one of the major listing exchanges, is aware of that and is now trying to fix it. I don't want to get too technical on tokenomics and things of that nature, but all of these currencies to some extent are inflationary, right? All of these technologies are inflationary at some extent. And Bitcoin, which has been around for about 13 years, has about 19 million Bitcoin. It's obviously its top end is 21 million, which they say it will reach at about 2,100. Miami Coin in less than a year has 3.65 billion issued. So I think that's way too much. That's way too inflationary. So they've got to fix that. They got to find a way to fix that. And if they do, I think that the core of the project can be successful.
And let's just go back to the poll a little bit, because part of the interest here in Miami, in order to make it a hub, is attracting top tech talent. When it comes to companies, what companies are you talking to, are you speaking with, to come here to Miami? I mean, your governor Ron DeSantis has, been out and talked about Elon Musk potentially coming here. Is that a conversation that you've had, and who else potentially have you talked to?
Well, let me first address sort of that entire metric, right? So we're #1 in the nation right now in tech job growth, and we're #1 in the nation in tech job migration. And when you look at a place like Silicon Valley, for example, 95% of the people in Silicon Valley were not born in Silicon Valley. Right, it's not like they don't have like a massive hospital there for people to be born. So the point is that people go where capital is and where they can scale, right? And the fact that we're becoming a massive aggregator of capital and a massive deployer of capital is going to attract people from around the world. Having said that, we'd love to have Twitter here. I have tweeted at Elon Musk.
Have you talked to him personally?
I have not talked to him personally. I don't have his cell phone number.
Okay.
He doesn't have my cell phone number as far as I know. No, we have friends in common. And if at any moment he wanted to reach out to have that conversation, we have talked about some of his other companies like the Boring Company and doing a comprehensive transportation system here in Miami underground. And we've talked in other occasions, but certainly we would love to have Twitter here. We think that that what he is trying to accomplish with Twitter dovetails very nicely with the brand of the city of Miami.
Are there other companies that you've been potentially in talks with coming here?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically infinite number of companies, but
some of the promising ones, maybe.
I'm trying to think if I don't violate any confidences here. Look, Microsoft just took a big, increased their stake here at 50,000 feet. Blackstone Tech just increased their FTEs by 400%. McKinsey just increased their FTEs by 400% as well. There's been talk about Apple. There's been talk about places like Cisco. There's been talk about Twitter. So I mean, you're talking about what I would put those in what I call the anchor tenant category. And then I think what's really cool about Miami is that we were very, very entrepreneurial. We have a tremendous startup culture. We were ranked #1 in the nation in startups by the Kauffman Foundation a few years ago. What now you're seeing is the ability to scale. And so you have people like a Keith Rabois, an Orlando Bravo, a Dan Sunheim. They're young people, right? They're people that are in their late 40s, early 50s, who have brought billions of dollars in funds here. I think Thoma Bravo is now over 100 billion. D1 Capital is at 30, 40 billion. CI Financial, who's run by a young Canadian, is $256 billion fund, right? So these people have a 10, 15, 20-year runway. So all we're seeing is the moment. What I'm seeing is the future. And the future for our city is incredible.
Is Amazon potentially also going to expand here?
Amazon has already expanded in Coral Gables, and certainly I think we're on the cusp of getting something big, like Jeff Bezos moving here or Elon Musk moving here. I firmly believe that when the tweet came out that said F Elon Musk, and he said message received, had it been in this moment, he would have moved to Miami, not Austin.
Not Austin.
No. Listen, there's nobody in Sao Paulo or Paris or any other part of the world saying, man, I can't wait to get on that plane to Austin. It's just, it's just not happening.
That is a bold statement.
I mean, listen, if you can find me somebody in Colombia or anywhere that's saying, I can't wait to get on that plane to Austin, please videotape it for me, because
this is on the record.
It is. It's fine. Listen, Steve's a good friend. I love Steve, and I don't want Joe Rogan to beat up on me. But I don't think Austin has, as much as I like Steve and I love this sort of Austin is weird, Austin, right, brand, it's not an international city. I don't think they would argue that they're an international city. I think Miami is a global city. And like I said, we're in the epicenter of 5 mega markets, and none of those 5 markets are any closer to the other ones than we are to all of them.
Well, let's just talk about, you brought up Texas, the differences here in Florida, one of which being, of course, the parental rights and education bill that Governor Ron DeSantis recently signed. We've seen companies come out and, express their own concern with it, right, with coming to Florida. So does that get in the way potentially of your expansion plans for the city?
My view of that is, look, I think all of us can agree that, children should not be learning sexuality in the school system, right? That the parents are the right,
Should not be?
Should not be. And I think parents are the right venue for that. At the same time, we have a thriving LGBTQ community here in Miami. And that's something that we also believe in nurturing, right? We believe that we should have a thriving LGBTQ community here in our city, and it's part of our identity, right? Part of the diversity of our city is that we do have that, and we embrace that. And I'm a Republican. I'm not ashamed to say that. And at the same time, I'm also not ashamed to say what I just said earlier.
Have you had conversations though with Governor Ron DeSantis following him signing that bill? Because we've seen Disney pull.
I haven't spoken to the governor in like 3 years.
Okay, so then how do you get? Also on the record here. Maybe he'll talk to you. Are you concerned at all,
my
though?
number.
I mean, I know you said the LGBTQ community is growing here, but Disney has, stopped political donations in Florida because of this reason. So how do you get around some of these concerns that companies have?
I think you should be asking the governor these questions.
Well, but I mean, if you talk about Miami being a hub,
Yeah.
this will inevitably be something that the companies ask you about.
Look, I would be happy to address those issues on a case-by-case basis with any company that has a problem with it. Obviously, the Pivot Conference left Miami, and that was something that I would have preferred not to see happen. Kara, who interviewed me, it was a great interview, and Scott, are great people. And it would have been wonderful to keep that conference. We should have kept that conference. I spoke to her about it. She understands that it wasn't anything that I did personally. And our county mayor also tried to intervene. And I think what happens is, look, these ideological battles have real consequences, right? And they affect people. They affect people's lives. They affect people's jobs, right? And I think that's something we've got to really be conscientious of. This is when something goes from the ideological to the real, it becomes magnified, right, in its impact. And so, look, some people say that some people like to make a statement. I like to make a difference. Okay, that's what I'm about. So just leave it at that.
Governor, what do you say to Miami residents? I mean, you said you're born in Miami, who are seeing sort of this explosive growth happening in the city. They're seeing rents rising. They're seeing a lot of changes happening around them. What do you say to those who maybe think this is all happening really fast for them?
Yeah.
Especially those who might get priced out of living here when you have all these other people coming in.
It's the number one issue right now, rising rents. And I think the first thing we have to understand is, why is it happening? And we have to ask ourselves, why is it happening? When I sit in a room with the mayor of Austin, the mayor of New York, and the mayor of Denver, and we're all seeing the same thing in our cities, which are, very different cities in very different parts of the country. We know that it's not a Miami thing, it's not an Austin thing, it's not a Denver thing, it's not a New York thing. It's something that's happening across our country. And part of the reason why is because government has lost complete fiscal responsibility. They're spending money like a drunken sailor. And right now, what people don't understand is there's still $2.1 trillion that has not hit the street. That's $950 billion from the American Rescue Plan, Part 2, because it came in 2 tranches. So Tranche 1 was delivered last year, Tranche 2 will be delivered next year, and $1.2 trillion of an infrastructure bill that still has not hit the streets. So if you think we have inflation now, aside from the supply chain issues that we have, which are both physical and human supply chain issues, particularly with the conflict in Ukraine, it's not pretty what we have, before us. Now, what are the answers? I think one is we have the ability to grow. The city of Miami, has the ability to grow 10x in its development envelope. So the delta between what's built and what can be built is a 10-to-1 multiple. And I think that's, that gives us the ability to grow, where other places like, for example, San Francisco, which has artificially limited its supply, or New York, that's kind of built out, they have to struggle with some of those issues. We have 47,000 units in our residential pipeline right now to be built in the next 2 to 3 years. And that's about a 25% increase in our entire housing stock. So we have that. We've also dedicated about $100 million for affordable housing that we're leveraging at a 20-to-1 or 15-to-1 ratio in the capital stack, meaning for every dollar we put in, we're getting $15 to $20 from the private sector matching it. And that's going to provide us with tens of thousands of affordable housing units going into the future. So I don't think that there's a community in America that has a better shot at coming out of this in a better way than we do.
Despite all of the tech and everything that is pouring in, the crypto coming into the city, you still are optimistic about it?
Well, look, we have hyper demand. Everybody wants to be here. Last time I checked, I can't put up a wall to prevent them from coming. So,
are you trying to?
I'm not, of course not. I mean, 70% of the people that live in this city were not born in this city. I'm the first mayor of Miami in the 125-year history of the city that was actually born in the city of Miami, right? And that's a true statement. So it means that we've always embraced outsiders. We've always embraced immigrants. We're a city of immigrants. My parents were exiled from their country of birth, which was Cuba. because a leader at that time said, hey, just give us all your property and give us all your businesses, and don't worry, I'll make everybody equal. And he accomplished that goal. He made everybody equally miserable. It was 100%. So yeah, I mean, that's the trauma that we contextualize our experiences through.
What's the main concern when you talk to Miami residents, sort of in the short term and the long term, about the city?
I think the main concern is obviously rents in the short term. In the medium term is we want to create a Miami that's here for everyone. We don't want to create a Miami that's here for some. We have a brand that's called Miami Forever, and then we put a Y on it, and then O-N-E, right? Miami for everyone. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to realize the American dream as they see it. So for us, that means upskilling, education. For me, education is a great equalizer. And I think we have to do everything we can to give people the educational opportunities to succeed in a modern day economy, in an ever evolving, ever disruptive economy. And that's what we're focusing on. We have a couple of hacks to get there. But when I wake up in the mirror, when I wake up in the morning.
And look in the mirror. It was close. Close.
When I wake up in the mirror, looking up in the morning, when I wake up in the morning, look at the mirror, I have to be convinced that I'm doing everything I can to create a more fair city and give people, because we all know that we didn't start at the same starting line. And I think that's a truth. No matter what party, ideology, that's just a fundamental truth. Anybody can beat Usain Bolt in a 100-meter dash if they start at the 90th meter. So I think we have to think profoundly about that and what we can do to make the world fair. I don't think it's a government. I think there's a lack of humility sometimes in thinking that government is the solution to every problem. I think we should do it with the NGO community, the religious community, our civic community, our corporate community, and our government community working together to create the kind of world that we can all be proud of. And that's what's going to make us not just a Miami that's here forever, but an America that's here forever.
All right, and Mayor, just finally, we're talking about 2024 already. I know your term doesn't end until 2025.
That's true.
You've talked about it being exciting to take a higher role. What would that look like?
What would it look like? I don't know how to answer what would it look like.
What would it be?
What would it be? Okay, it would be a higher role.
Come on,
sure.
Give us more.
You said we're on the record, right?
Come on.
Look, I'm blessed to be president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors through the middle of next year. I do think that I want to see a country that is unified. I do want to see a country that embraces the American dream in whatever form and fashion. I do want to see a country that strives for fairness. I do want to see a country that understands the disruptive opportunities and disruptive threats that exist in terms of creating that prosperity. So, I'm sort of taking that journey one day at a time.
Is that the America of today, you think?
I don't think so.
So we got a ways to go.
I do think we have a ways to go. But I'm optimistic. I'm bullish. I think other people see that same landscape in a very pessimistic way, and it's understandable because, politics in today's day and age can be depressing when you see the hyper division. But one good thing with me is I'm not Washingtonized, so that's good.
No, you're Miami-ized.
I'm Miami.
Let's just call it that. Yes. Mayor Suarez, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Please welcome to the stage Ishfeen Jolly, founder and CEO of Open Sponsorship, and Bloomberg's Ed Hammond.
Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Ishfeen, it's great to have you with us. We're just talking backstage about the business, about what you do. To me, it's a fascinating concept because it's so illustrative of where sports are these days, where social media has sort of taken branding and the ability of individual athletes to brand. Let me start by asking you, if I put myself in the position of being, let's say I'm the 3rd or 400 best driver in the US, I don't have any particular sort of profile through the sport, how does your company help me realize some of the benefits that potentially I could get by joining a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, sponsorship, the idea of sponsorship back in the day was always around, I'm going to go in, I'm going to pay an athlete, multi-year deals, all-encompassing, photo shoots, appearances, all of that. And what we realized with the rise of influencer marketing, digital marketing, social media was you're actually getting athletes who may not be in the top 5%, but they've got a following, they're on social, they want to do deals, they have interesting interests, right? Maybe they're vegan, or they support a certain mental health awareness month is their big thing. And so what we're doing is essentially giving them a voice and a forum to connect with brands who are legitimately also interested in that cause, and just through our platform connecting the two.
But what's the value to a brand, right? If I'm in a big brand and I want the marketing exposure of having a sports person, there are some who are very obviously marketable, right? Like if you think of LeBron James or Serena Williams or any sports person really at the top of their sport who can be identified. What do I get by having someone who is not very well known and perhaps has a social media following that is around the team they play for or something, but doesn't necessarily have any brand cachet themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for marketing people today, it's all about authentically reaching out to their core demographic and then thinking about new audiences, right? If you speak to any brand today, a lot of the legacy brands are saying, we need to reach out to diverse audiences, whether it's Hispanic or, younger males or whatever else. And I think that's where this all comes in, which is the power of the non-top 5% to be very hyper-focused on a certain demographic. So, we do a lot with the USA women's soccer team. The way that those girls influence young teens, female teens who are coming up in soccer, such a fast-growing sport. Or, we've worked with like a David Ortiz and done stuff in Spanish with him, or Ivan Rodriguez. And these kind of things didn't really happen before. And so it's about finding these people who go, okay, you're going to speak to a certain demographic, geography, gender, ethnicity, locality that I couldn't really reach by myself through a really powerful voice.
Now, I saw on I think actually a Bloomberg story about your company. You've done 10,000 deals, or upwards of 10,000 deals with over 400 companies, which, as someone who spends most of my day job covering mergers and acquisitions, I know is a significant number of deals to get done. I wonder, when you're looking for the right qualities in an athlete to go with a particular brand, what metrics do you focus on, and how do you decide, all right, this is the person, even though they might not be well known, that fits your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it actually really varies. Some people are just looking for the biggest following possible, right? Like, how many millions of followers does this athlete have? Some people are looking for great content. One of the things that we struggle with is that athletes are not naturally the best content creators. They're not always natural, which is why, again, obviously we saw today Alex Rodriguez, he's amazing in front of the camera, but a lot of his teammates are not comfortable even speaking English, right, from baseball days. And so there's different things that people are looking for, like where are their followers, or, do they have an authentic fit? And price is obviously a huge one. One of our investors is Serena Williams, and recently our team were kind of asking her questions, and, they were like, well, what do you look for in a deal? And she was like, well, ultimately, authenticity and all of that is great, but my time is really valuable, and so price does come into it as well.
So talk to me about authenticity, because that seems to be so crucial to any athlete that's wanting to establish a brand. But how do they maintain that while at the same time, if you're not a commercially successful athlete and you maybe, have a short career span, you're going to want to do as many deals as possible and sign up to as many brands as possible?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I would honestly say that there is so much competition. I mean, college NIL just opened up, right? And that introduced about 465,000 athletes into the ecosystem for sponsorship. And so one of the things we focus on is the fact that if you don't have authenticity, you probably won't get the ROI, and then you're not going to come back to sports. So actually, it is most important to try and find someone who's a good fit for you. Like if you're a car dealership selling secondhand cars, there is going to be an athlete out there who values the secondhand car market, or they remember their first ever secondhand car. So let's tap into that. Maybe there's a way to connect it to their past if it's not to their current, persona today.
And in terms of sort of who you're taking out of the equation, I mean, presumably the agents traditionally have negotiated a lot of these deals, taking a percentage of the fee at least. Is the idea over time that this model will be applicable to those bigger name athletes as well, who potentially in the past have always relied on their agents to source their branding and marketing deals?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of people get surprised by this, that a lot of our power users are agencies. And I kind of liken it a lot to real estate, where even though there are tools out there to sell your own house, list it, whatever else, most people rely on a real estate agent still. And the reason being is because the services they provide are far greater than just the transaction. And I think it's the same way in our world. Now, we have two amazing athletes on our cap table, but if we take them deals, they're still working through their team, even though they're investors in us. And the reason being is because, whether it's the agent provides more contractual services or looking at their player contracts or branding and stuff that we're not doing at this point in time. So we love working with agencies on that side, the talent agencies. Where the disruption probably happens is back in the day, you would need a internal sports marketing expert to help you with this transaction. It's almost like you don't need that as much anymore because of us.
When I think about sort of bigger name athletes signing up to these deals, they're often extremely lucrative, but they're also often multi-year. Presumably, when brands are looking at less well-known athletes, they're not going to want to take that kind of commitment, at least for the period of time. So how does that work? Is it just much more ephemeral, and the athletes know that going in, or how do you sort of manage that for them, that they may be only getting this gig for a one-off potentially?
Yeah, so good question. I'd say there's two sides to it. So obviously you love the idea of a multi-year deal, guaranteed income, we're going to build a brand for life. But we were talking about this before. Athletes often don't want to post on social. They don't want to do appearances when they're injured or when they're going through a bad part of their life. They've just been cut from an NFL team. The last thing they want to do is to start being like, hey, look at my amazing watch or whatever else. And so in a way, the good thing about a lot of the shorter, the 3 to 6 month that we do is, hey, actually you can control. Are you wanting to do it at that time? And it's really interesting. We see that with our athletes, that when they're playing well, they'll do more, even to the point that it's their wife's birthday. They know that they need to buy something special. We'll start seeing deals wanting to be done beforehand so they can spend a bit more. So it's quite interesting to see how it is so cyclical.
And on the sort of issue of social media, I guess that's going to be a big question for any brand going into this. Like, how do you, as the intermediary, guarantee the quality control of the athlete they're signing up, that they're not going to suddenly start posting stuff on social media that is completely out of sync with what the brand is promoting?
I mean, that's a lot of what the technology that we've built controls this. And so, I'd say it's similar to Airbnb, where, before it was like a way to find your house. And then suddenly it was like, okay, your key exchange is going to go through here. Your payments are going to go through here. And now there's so much security. You literally go on a flight to Brazil and you believe that there's going to be a house waiting for you, right? And like the confidence that takes. And so I think in a similar way, we built a lot of tech to try and make the process so that you're not like, oh my gosh, like, is this actually going to happen? Is it going to be good? And so we put a lot of checks and balances, content approvals. We hold the money in escrow, so it's like an insurance. So we do a lot of this on our back end to ensure that the deals are good.
How do you think about that risk though? Because if you're carrying that, and presumably you don't have much sort of ability to control what the athlete does in their personal time.
It is sometimes an issue, like that example of, especially here in America, like an athlete gets cut on a team, they can move, literally move city like this. And we've had times where product's been sent to their house and they're like, we don't even live there anymore. And so I would say it's sometimes a little bit of an issue, but the good thing is that because we hold the money in escrow, like the worst case scenario is we're returning the brand their money with a few apologies, which it seems to be quite a good insurance in a world where actually before us, you would have had to have spent at least 50% up front and kind of lost that, right? Or in court to try and get that back.
Traditionally, when I think of the sort of the biggest brands on the planet that have used athletes heavily in promotional stuff, it tends to be brands that do something, that is closely aligned with athletics, whether it's sportswear or makers of sports equipment, etc. But now we're increasingly seeing, CPG and other industries take up athletes as brand ambassadors. How important is that to the growth of a business like yours, that we're seeing these sort of non-sports related businesses becoming much more concerned with having athletes as part of their sort of overall promotion?
Yeah, I would say absolutely huge. I mean, there's a few different reasons. I mean, crypto.com, right? Like, tangential to sports, but is a different vertical, and they are owning this weekend, and that's happening across the board. And I'd say the main reason why is, one of the things is that a lot of the old school sponsors of sports, right? Your Verizons or your Fords, like Ford just pulled out of NFL, like, someone needs to replace that. And a lot of these new age startups, your new unicorns, are coming in to do that. And for us, what's interesting is influencer marketing, I talked about it before, billion-dollar industry, grew up in the last 10 years, if that. Very heavily skewed on the female audience. If you think about even like male reality TV stars or male models, a lot of their demographic is female. And so what happens is a lot of the love we get, so we do all of the work for like a Walmart, Stitch Fix, Foot Locker, a lot of them, when they think about speaking to their male demographic on social, no one else is really able to do that apart from sports. Maybe rappers, country, like a few different music verticals, but sports really helps out. And so the love that we're seeing is like that geographic, but also that demographic, that male focus. And that's why we get, by far, number one category is apparel and fashion.
But if the audience is largely female, are you also skewing towards more female athletes, or is it still mostly concentrated on male sports?
Yeah, I'd say, it's interesting, of our 15,000 athletes, about 50% are in deals, 50% are male and 50% female. But in terms of signups to our website, it's about 25% female. So even though there's a lot fewer female athletes, they're getting more deal flow. And I would say, back to the point of, they produce better content, their engagement is higher, they're a little bit more reliable, no offense to male athletes. So I love doing female athlete deals, for sure.
And that's a really interesting point. They're producing the content themselves. So this isn't them doing a sort of an organized and curated marketing campaign. This is them being paid to sort of do what they would be doing anyway, but just do it under the, or in connection to a particular brand.
Yeah, and so if you think about it, a lot of younger athletes, college athletes, are naturally more, they're on TikTok, they're producing great content, but a lot of your NBA or NFL players, like, they didn't grow up in a sphere of taking selfies at home, right? In fact, like, that would not have been encouraged for them. So sometimes when we do campaigns, it's like, maybe you should smile in that picture, it'll look better. And so it is harder with the traditional male athletes who are a little bit older to get them to produce like organic, naturally good content.
I get told that a lot when people take pictures too. So just on that, when you're, I suppose, training or helping athletes think through like how they should curate, how they should manage their own brand, is that, what's the sort of investment thesis there? Because if you're spending a lot of time doing that and someone is only getting a few, not very high dollar value deals a year, how do you justify that?
Yeah. So again, I'd say this is where our agencies really help out, because they're often the ones who are guiding the athlete, and they're doing it at scale for us. The beauty of tech is, we have a dashboard. Every single athlete who logs in sees this dashboard. We've got little tips on there, like, hey, think about your lighting. Here's a great post. Have a look at this. And so it is up to us to educate them, because we essentially lose out. But some of the deals we do are like $100, $200. The margin for us is so small that we can't be doing it one by one. And so we're always thinking about how do we create tech or scale the education piece.
And just before we wrap up, talk to me about growth and sort of other markets that you might be looking into. I know you and I, before we came out, discussed the Indian market around cricket and obviously the IPO, and it's just phenomenal success there. But are there other parts of the world that you would look at as potential opportunities here?
Yeah. What I love about sports is that it's so global. I mean, this event, right? Like this weekend. And so I think for us, there's a real opportunity to make sure sponsorship is truly global. At the moment, sponsorship is quite localized. The Boston Celtics will get Boston brands, and the NBA is opening that up and whatever else. But I think for us, that's huge. So we just opened up our UK office. UK already powers EMEA. We're thinking about like our Asia Pac strategy. So along with geography though, we're also thinking about music. It's the same problems. It's really interesting. A lot of the same agents. So that for us is really interesting. College NIL, touched upon, is huge. So lots of different things for expansion.
But isn't sponsorship always going to be necessarily localized? Because otherwise you lose that resonance. If you have a brand that has nothing to do with the city where the team is based, or nothing to do with where the athlete is sort of well known, why would they want to sponsor them?
Well, think about how many brands are there in Miami this weekend who would have potentially loved to get like a Danny Ricciardo or even a Lewis Hamilton to do something with them. But because those guys, their agents are not in the US or they're not here, they have no clue. Athletes are constantly traveling, like golf. They barely spend any time at home, right? And so in a way, it is a localized strategy, but where they're going versus being like, where's their home base?
Ishfeen, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome to the stage Starwood Capital Group Chairman and CEO Barry Sternlicht and Bloomberg's Sonali Basak.
So Barry, you're known to have made a massive bet on Miami. You moved here, you moved your headquarters here. We have the F1 races here. So how does that change your outlook on the prospects for Miami, given that so many people are now here?
Well, thanks for having me. I did move down here in late 2016, so I feel like the Mayflower. I was one of the first people from the north, it seemed like, that actually repotted. It's not true, but certainly the beginning of this second wave. In Miami, I used to come here as a child, so it's only gotten better and better, really. And I'm impressed with the kind of development that's taken place, the infrastructure improvements. As an example, here on Miami Beach, they didn't tear down the convention center, they reskinned it and expanded it. And then they built a park in front of it. And the infrastructure that will come when they connect the beach to the CBD of Miami, the Central Business District, with a monorail, which is going to be privately funded. It's just getting better and better, and it's gaining momentum as more people move down here and bring more culture. So F1, can't be more excited, going to the races tomorrow and Sunday. As a hotelier in part, we have the one hotel here. Miami's been adding so many events. So for a hotel, when I was younger, when I was running Starwood Hotels, Miami, I called it a one-hump camel. You had the winter when everybody came down and it was really exciting. And the rates were good, but you were empty other parts of the year. It's certainly the summer. Then Latin America, South America got really more affluent, and their winter is our summer, so when the snowbirds left, they filled in. Now, but you still had the off seasons, so now you have Crypto Week, Tech Week, now followed by F1, so the hotels are having a field day, and it's extending the season, and it's good for the merchants, and it's good for the city. So, this is a city, I grew up in Connecticut, really, and spent most of my career up there. And I spent a lot of time in New York City, of course. I lived in Chicago for 7 years. And these cities were you heard Mayor Suarez, where you have the government working with you to help you succeed. It's unbelievable. It's a whole new cup of tea. I've never experienced it. We actually can call the city and actually things get done. It's like crazy.
You sold your place. You sold your place in Manhattan to put a bigger bet on this city. I heard you say a couple days ago that you are surprised at how many people are actually back in New York, given all of the changes it saw during the pandemic. So when you think about the long-term prospects for the capital of the country in terms of finance, in terms of technology, in terms of talent, which wins?
Well, I mean, New York's New York, so New York proved, as I think we all thought it would, it's a haven. As it gets less expensive, it was a haven for young talent. And people, New York is a 24-hour city, and there's only one New York. It's a great place. Having said that, the headwinds of people feeling unsafe, criminal activities. I myself, walking around the Village, didn't feel very safe, and I've been going there. I'm old, so I've been doing that a lot. And that I feel differently in Miami. Despite the fact that you see this, media covers a event that usually happens around Memorial Day between 5th and 15th Street on the beach. The rest of the beach doesn't really feel that activity. And the city, very high taxes. The taxes keep going up. The attitude towards business is not friendly. The government is dysfunctional. Rent control shows up, and the unions make everything hideously expensive to build and operate. We can't, in our hotels in the city, we were the largest hotel operator in the city. We can't come up with a recipe to make a restaurant successful when it's unionized. And I don't know who they think that benefits. And now with the DAs allowing, not prosecuting crime. I mean, I was in San Francisco just last week. We have an office there. You want to cry. And I wonder who thinks this is a good thing. And I know who's funding these DA elections. And I just want to ask them, what do they think they're trying to accomplish? Because they're not helping anyone, and they're destroying historically wonderful cities. San Francisco is in serious trouble. And maybe you have to have a terrible crisis before you have the sunrise, but the crisis is no fun to look at. I mean, walking into a Walgreens and you can't even buy a toothbrush. You have to open the cabinet with a key, find someone to open it for you. So that's not progress, and I wish they would stop calling the progressive movement progressive, because it's really socialist and communist. It has nothing to do with progressive.
Let's take a step back and talk about this in the lens of pricing, the economy, and the idea of people being priced out of places like San Francisco. You mentioned almost the opposite happening in New York now. What about Miami? I mean, prices are rising so quickly here when it comes to real estate values. How do young people move here, live here, work here, and B, does Miami risk becoming San Francisco one day over the long term, given that?
No, New York and San Francisco are dominated by blue legislatures, both at the state level and at the city level, and the city council is more left than the mayor himself. And Miami and the red states or the purple states don't have any of that situation. These are non-union states. For the most part, the right-to-work states, and they're winning. I mean, the facts are: look at Texas, look at Tennessee, look at Florida. There's more job growth. There's more people moving to cities, and the state of Florida ran a $12 billion budget surplus. They're not even in a deficit. So, by the way, they make it up with real estate taxes. You pay a lot of real estate taxes here, much more than you do in the Northeast, but you don't pay income taxes at the state level or capital gains taxes. Miami has definitely gotten more expensive, but it's still cheaper to live here. Rentals are cheaper here, even though they've gone up 25% year over year. And like any place, there'll be further out development and opportunities for people to live less expensively. And the problem Miami has and Southern Florida has is the Everglades on one side, the ocean on the other. It's like a tube of toothpaste that's squeezed north to Palm Beach, and then now to Jupiter, and then up to Vero Beach. So they're going to have to come back, which they're doing, and redevelop what's here. So you're seeing neighborhoods get, Miami Beach was kind of run down, and now it is getting renovated. It's getting, it reminds me of Cartagena in Colombia, because you go there and half the stock a third of the stock is finished renovation, a third is under construction, and a third hasn't begun its renovation. Miami is further along than that, Miami Beach is at least.
So as we're talking about blue versus red and politics in cities and how it plays out, as somebody who owns many hotels, oversees so many places where large groups of people gather, when you look at what's happening in terms of the parental rights and education bill that was signed into law by Governor DeSantis, are you concerned at all about how it'll impact certain inflows in terms of concessions and events into the city? I'm
going to stay away from that kind of politics. It's not my thing. I'd say that it's not helpful. I mean, partly it's the media made a bill that, when they say the name of the bill, I agree. The bill itself was just really don't teach sexuality from kindergarten to third grade, which in schools, which I would like to be the person to talk to my children about the birds and the bees. It's one of the great rites of passage for a father with his child. So, I don't necessarily think that was a terrible thing. It doesn't actually mention the word gay, the bill. But I understand. I was listening to Bob Iger speak yesterday about the issue, and I think it was nonsense, and it's awful to go after Disney, which is wholesome. We're just distracting people from real issues, the things that this country should care about, which is education, improving education. If I were Governor DeSantis, I'd take his $12 billion surplus and put it behind teachers. That's how you build a great state. That's how you fix the issues in this country. So, he should give teachers raises. We should build more schools. We should educate our youth. We should invest in our low-income housing communities, our poorer communities, and improve their lives, and that will help the state grow in a more balanced way. The state of Florida itself, it's not just Miami. I mean, we own 115,000 apartments. We're the largest apartment owner in the country. We own 60 million square feet of office. We own stuff all over the world. We have over 100 billion in assets, 120 billion in assets. We have to invest our capital where we think our investors are going to get the best returns, and we've tilted away. When I was growing up, I used to invest on both coasts. Like, you would buy California and New York, you would never visit these states because they have infinite supply theoretically, because there's light zoning in places like Texas. You can build an office building in your backyard if you want. So, but now, for the last 7 years, our focus has been in the Sun Belt states, which are attracting businesses. I saw today, Boeing was leaving Chicago for Virginia. I mean, these cities are killing themselves. The worst part is the politicians want these people to leave. In New York City, the legislature said, we want values to go down, it will help our people. They're just creating a negative reinforcement cycle where the social burden is falling on an ever smaller group of people. You have some altruistic older people who have not yet left New York, but it's becoming punitive to them. And for the favor of paying 35% or 15% of their income in taxes, they get ridiculed in the media and the press. And half of America doesn't pay any tax. And I was on TV the other day talking about this, and I got accosted by a reporter from another network. And that isn't the point. The point is, people, if you want to invest in solar, which I do, or renewables, which I do, heretofore, it didn't make economic sense. We actually have a renewables business. You needed a wind credit. You needed a tax credit for the government to propel investment into those. The only people who can invest in that stuff are wealthy people. They're getting the credits. We were actually inducing them to lower their taxes by investing in stuff. The federal government has a payoff on that because we don't have to rely on foreign oil. And we have less pollution, less cleanup because we're investing in renewables. That's how the system works. But the media has distorted this. The millionaires and billionaires are cheating. They're actually, most of us, including me, and I got called out on this by ProPublica or something, I'm paying I paid 34% tax rates. I checked last 2 years. So, I'm happy to pay my share. I just wish the government would use our money more wisely.
So another issue that's gotten extraordinarily politicized is cryptocurrency. And we took a poll on Twitter, and apparently when we asked our audience what the biggest barriers to crypto adoption would be, 46% said regulatory scrutiny. Another 27% said risk-averse investors. Another 27% said central bank competition. You're an investor who I know has been thinking about cryptocurrency to some degree. What do you think about all that? And also, what are you going to do?
I wonder who you asked. Because most people would. I think regulatory scrutiny is that when you don't want to report the fact that you bought it or you sold it or you don't want to pay taxes on it. Because I think it has to be taxed. Like, it is a security or a currency. They can decide which one it is. I've publicly said everyone should have 0.5% of their net worth in Bitcoin. And my theory was if it goes to $1 million a coin, you'd kill yourself if you don't own it. And if it goes to zero, you'll be fine, and your relative net worth to the rest of the crypto kids would go up because they'd be broke. That's been my adopted theory. I don't really care. It's 0.5% of my net worth or 1%. Somebody said it was 3 or 4. It's not. The digital blockchain is going to change the world and disrupt financial transactions. we were talking about this last night I was coming home from California with a very knowledgeable person. I mean, companies like Visa, anything where there's a payment and a transfer payment, like we should issue our funds in tokens. Our investors could exchange interest in our funds frictionless with no lawyers, no transfer documents. There are a lot of, it's going to happen. Now, the value of all these tokens and coins is up in the air. I mean, I don't think anyone can tell you, and they're all like, some of them are like little Ponzi schemes. You use it and they pay you more of the same thing, and you get more of it and you use it, and then you see the same herd mentality in the coins that you see in the stock market, which Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger this weekend called a casino, and it was absolutely a speculative mess. You know, it completely divorced from anything I ever learned in valuation. And you hear how you were a dinosaur, and I kept saying, you guys should have been alive in 2001 when the NASDAQ dropped 85% and companies disappeared overnight. And it's just happening again. You're seeing the exact same run. Every 20 years, people forget, and they do it again. But it was crazy. I had people telling me that 100 times revenues for companies are cheap, well-known firms, right? I mean, that's insanity.
Listen, we're at this place in the economy where the Fed raised interest rates the most that it has in more than 20 years. Inflation is at the highest in more than 40 years. So what are you looking at in terms of the repercussions that the markets are going to feel based on all these moves that have not happened in a very, very long time?
So I'm going to stick to real estate for a second. You basically have a tug of war now between interest rates, rental growth, and which can overwhelm, and is at the moment, interest rates. And then I think partly supply, which is going to get hurt by higher costs and the fact that replacement cost is rising 20%, because both labor and materials, if you can even find the materials, are that much more expensive. So real estate is having a bit of we're a safe haven. Usually in inflationary times, you want to own property because it's so much harder. And the theory, just for people who don't understand how real estate works, if a building costs $1,000 to build and you want to get a 10% return, and you get $100 rents. If the building costs $2,000 a foot to build instead of $1,000, and you still want to get the 10% return, you've got to get $200 rents. So in-place rents have to rise to justify new construction. So in-place inventory is protected. That's the generic theory. And it does work. I mean, you won't see a lot of the permitted stuff. You're seeing right now the housing market slow down. It'll probably really slow down even harder. You have the highest mortgage rates in 19 years. But there's a tremendous lack of supply in the housing market. We underbuilt housing in the last decade to prior decades by almost 15 million units. So you're seeing a squeeze. And now they'll have to rent because they can't afford to buy. So that's okay for rentals. And we own 100,000 apartments, 15,000 homes that we rent, and we continue to buy more, but we're constructive of where we buy them, where affordability is still okay. And rising wages is really good. We're happy about half this inflation. We should be jumping for joy that wages are up 5.5%. And the fact that I have to pay a housekeeper $20 an hour instead of $14, I'm actually okay with. I think it's fine. That's the way capitalism is supposed to work. We're helping those who are most in need. On the other hand, the disruptions of the supply chain, which are real and are going to get worse because China just shut down and we already have the inventory. It's 3 months from now and 4 months from now. We run out of inventory, we want to replace our stocks, and we don't have the stuff. That's when you're going to see. So you're going to see inflation. And raising rates isn't going to help the supply chain. It's just going to dampen the economy and hurt employment. Raising rates at the pace they're talking about, where they were very late to the party, and my guess is they're going to overdo it on the way up because the economy was slow anyway, because we've already spent or about to spend the rest of our stimulus checks, frankly, sadly, on more higher gas, higher oil, and higher interest payments.
So is it the tail wagging the dog here? You saw this wage growth, but now you're seeing a lot of people start talking about the potential for a recession once again.
Oh, we're going to have a slowdown, and the question is how big, and will it be shallower? There's no doubt. I've been on the record, fourth quarter, first quarter, it'll slow dramatically. And frankly, all the geopolitics and the politics of our country are not helping anything. It doesn't make anyone feel particularly stable. And the prospects of the presidential election in front of us, and most people saying, isn't there anyone else in the United States who wants to run for president? that's I'm not going to go there, but I would like to go there. So I mean, you can't. I mean, we don't have a lot of great choices right now. Hopefully, there'll be a dark horse that'll show up that we'll all embrace and we'll pull this country back together. Because the average, you hear the movement about the police. 99% of policemen are good people, right? And some of this stuff just gets so hysterical, it's just ripping us apart. And I'm 60. I mean, I've never seen the media try to get the whole country hysterical on one side and hysterical on the other side. And 43% of the country is independent. We're the biggest party and we have nobody representing us. And the parties are thinning out on both sides. You're getting Bob Corker retires, all the moderates retire because they can't deal with the loonies in their parties. And so the parties become even more concentrated in the loonies. And then the media goes like this, and we watch Fox and watch CNN, and I can't find anyone to watch. I'm going to watch the cartoon channel to be more informative. So, I mean, we really need a candidate in the middle. We need and the country's moved on. Like Roe versus Wade, holy moly, like what is wrong with you people? So, like, in my opinion, like I totally understand late-term abortion, but you want to eliminate people with rape and incest? I mean, really? I mean, these aren't issues of national importance, frankly. Leave it to the states if you have to. Let's focus on stuff that matters to this country, like fixing our education system. I went to public high school. Like today, every parent says, I can't put my kid in public high school. That's terrible. We have to fix that. And that would fix our country. So like we have a lot of stuff that really matters. We need an energy policy. How could we not have a national energy policy? We're destroying the earth. I argue with these people on the right, like, are you out of your minds? We had, I think, 71,000 daily temperature records last year. There's gonna be drought in the Midwest. I own Mammoth Mountain, a ski resort. We had 4 years of drought. It was like, I looked at 100 years of records. We never had drought like that. So anyway, why am I talking about this? How did you get me so far off? I feel like as a cocktail, we should have a cocktail if we're doing this.
I wish I could follow
depressed.
up on every one of those things.
Anyone in the front row could run for president, we'd be better off.
Sternlicht. That's Barry Sternlicht, the CEO and chairman of Starwood Capital. He'll be around.
Welcome to the stage, hospitality entrepreneur David Grutman and Bloomberg's Jason Kelly.
Bro hugging going on backstage, so we're going to pick up right where he left off?
Yeah, any political issues you guys want to discuss?
The King of Miami,
wow.
You're here.
It's a lot to say.
Yeah. Let's talk about this city at this moment. You've seen this explosion firsthand. What happened? What sort of came together to create this cultural moment that it feels like Miami is experiencing?
I think the fact that we were open during the pandemic, us and Dubai were like really the only two cities that were open, and we were ripping it. So I feel like a lot of people saw that they don't have to pay the extra taxes. It's an amazing lifestyle here. It's a real city. We have real restaurants, real culture, real art. I mean, it's an amazing city. And then you have great mayors that are pushing the envelope here. And I think it's just an attractive place for people.
And so this weekend, obviously F1 marks a new chapter to some extent, or a new, I'm going to go there, acceleration, as it were. What does F1 mean, do you think?
I just think it puts that gold standard certificate for us that we're one of those major cities that should have F1. I think it brings us to the international, I mean, not like Miami's not internationally known, but now it says Miami's arrived.
Well, and from a sports perspective, and A-Rod and I were talking about this earlier, I mean, Miami is notable for its excellence in sports, for its breadth of sports. I believe, Beckham is a buddy. I mean, many people are buddies of yours. Beckham, I think, is one of them. I mean, he saw it in many ways before a lot of people did. What did he see? What do you see from the sports perspective here?
I mean, the sports perspective is a little challenging, I always thought, in Miami, because, unless you're winning, they're not going in Miami for the most part. So it takes, I think, the celebrity angle and something that's iconic like a David or a Jeter or Dan Marino. It just takes that celebrity element or event-esque. People in Miami want to feel like they're going to an event. And I think I opened a nightclub at the Hard Rock Stadium 10 years ago. We did live there, and it was like an event for people. I mean, I remember these Italians and stuff trying to figure out the game, but they all were going because it felt like an event. And I think that's what's special about Miami. Anything you do big in Miami, it feels like it's something bigger than just a sporting thing. It's an event.
So speaking of events, you mentioned the Super Bowl. That's the comparison that I feel like people keep making to this weekend. Is it right? Is it wrong? And how do you view it from an entertainer's perspective, from an impresario's perspective, if I'm to be so bold?
I think Super Bowl is more across the board. You have more general admission, more people just coming to see the spectacle. I think F1 has just brought luxury and richness and really high-end corporate sponsors, more so than a Super Bowl, but more like an Art Basel.
And so what does this weekend look like?
A lot of high table minimums. Yeah. Yeah, a lot.
So get ready, folks. Just that credit card bill is going to be high.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like real estate. As there's such a big demand for certain tables, and that's how we treat Live, Story, the restaurants, it's really real estate that you're buying, right? So everybody wants that waterfront view.
And so from the nightlife perspective, from the restaurant and entertainment perspective, where is Miami at this moment? Like what are the things that are different now or that are representative of what you think is happening?
I mean, Miami over the last 2 years, you have all the VC firms, all the founders, all these people coming down here, tech, everything. So it's made us raise our bar on how we give service and how we execute and stuff like that, because we want to execute like they're used to in cities, New York, London, San Francisco. And I think it's just brought it to another level. I mean, these people demand service, they demand hospitality, and they demand great food.
There's always obviously been a well-trod path between New York and Miami in many ways. And yet, I mean, it turned from maybe a 2-lane road to a superhighway over the last couple of years. Tell me more about the impact of that, because it feels like it's changed the geography of the city, the economics of the city, the demographics. Has it? I mean, what's it?
Yeah, guys, I mean, when I first started in the business 20 years ago, it was all about South Beach, South Beach, South Beach, South Beach. And now it's about Brickell and Wynwood and Allapattah coming up. And I just opened a place in Coconut Grove, which I would never open something in Coconut Grove years ago. It's one of my best stores ever, the Key Club. It just opened, and it's amazing to see. There's all these new pockets of Miami. So it's widen it, and Miami Beach now, when everyone left Miami Beach, now that's when we come to Miami Beach and start doing some great things.
Does that continue? Do you think that flow from New York and other places continue?
I mean, now that people have gotten a taste of Miami, I don't think they're going to let it go.
I don't want to go fully down the Barry Sternlicht political road. Wow. That was a journey. And yet, I do wonder, from your business perspective, if you see the legislation that's coming through the state. Does that worry you in terms of the growth of Miami?
The only thing that worries me is right now Miami Beach has a government that's trying to do at 2 a.m. and try to take away the nightlife part of it or the excitement part of Miami Beach, which I think is a challenge. That's kind of what one of the biggest attractions is, that we are open till 5 a.m., that you can have a little bit more later experience going out, eating, the whole thing, than to be closed up at 2 o'clock. That's the only thing that really concerns me. But thank God, I'm sure we have lots of people that are going to try to block that.
Right. But the overall state politics, you don't think are getting in the way, at least so far?
No, I mean, remember, we have a governor right now that's all about keeping us open and stuff like that. Not like, I would love to think the pandemic's completely gone. I hope so. But at least you know that you have that feel that if something does go awry, that you have a government that's pro-business.
And so,
unless you're Disney, then they're probably not so.
I think that's an entirely different topic. I do wonder, from your perspective, what you see, or let me back up one step. One of the things that we're seeing here, you've seen it up close and personal, is celebrities, entertainers, athletes, all flocking, not just this weekend, but overall. Is that just Miami being Miami, or is there something new and different happening in terms of drawing this really sort of high-octane celebrity crowd?
So Miami, to be honest with you, has always had a very high celebrity crowd.
Yeah.
I just think it's more magnified now, and you guys are seeing it more now because there's so many people here. There's so much events going on. It's shining light on it. But the one great thing about Miami is, this is where people go to let loose. They let their inhibitions go down, and they go crazy.
That's an invitation.
High table minimums.
Along the lines of those celebrities, though, increasingly they are coming to have a good time. They are still coming to have a good time, but increasingly they're coming here to do business.
Yeah.
You're in business with some of them, Pharrell being a great example.
Sure.
Go deep a little bit on that, if you will, because that strikes me as a really interesting partnership that you created that speaks to something larger going on within, shall I say, this world of multi-hyphenates, maybe, that we're living in?
I mean, my partnership with Pharrell Williams is great because he brings a different look on things than I'm used to. The great thing about Pharrell is he's fashion, hospitality, he's creative, he's music, he's everything. So there's a lot of celebrities that want to do stuff with me, but I'm very careful about, but Pharrell is just such a special man, and he sees things so ahead of people that it's great to collab with him and build these great projects together.
So tell us about some of the stuff you've done with him, because it is.
So our first project was Swan in the Design District. It's a great restaurant. I encourage you guys all to go. And next thing was a year ago was the Good Time Hotel. It's right here on 6th and Washington. Again, has a great restaurant called Strawberry Moon, but the pool is completely activated, and it's really something that's a full Instagrammable moment, and it's really highly curated. Please go by there as well. And then we're opening something at Atlantis. We took the original 3 towers of Atlantis and we created our own resort called Somewhere Else. That's a Pharrell name, obviously. And we're going to rethink the way the Bahamas and leisure is existing. And we're looking at everything from stem cell to being able to go in space and space perspective in a space balloon during your vacation, all sorts of great stuff. But it's going to be our resort brand that we're going to look to take that resort brand and open it up all around the world.
Pharrell obviously is a very unique brand and unique person. Are there other things that you, having seen what you've done with Pharrell, do you contemplate other similar partnerships? As you say, people want to work with you. What's the screen?
The great thing is all these entertainers and celebs, they want to put their money just like you guys do. They want to find investments and stuff like that that's going to pay just more than 10 or 20%. They're looking for a big X. So think of my business could give you that ability to do that. And it becomes a coupon that you clip for 15, 20 years when you sign a 20-year lease, if it works. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, it's not good. Not good. It's not good.
And you yourself have gotten into the venture business to some extent.
Yeah, guys. What's been great about being in Miami over the last 2 years is I get to meet with 1 or 2 founders a day. All the VC funds will bring these guys over to my house and stuff like that. And I've been able to invest in brands that I could pump into my ecosystem, from Daring Plant-Based Chicken to Owen's Mixers to Jamama Hot Sauce, Dream Pops I just did. And now this week I just did something called Goodles, a much healthier macaroni and cheese, which is amazing.
So how do you source deals?
It's funny how you get your deal flow. People know that, when you over-deliver for people and you say you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do, but do it more, all these founders I found talk to each other, right? All the VC firms talk to each other, so they bring me a lot of deal flow. And I'm kind of out there showing that I'm pushing, young entrepreneurs.
And so did you plug into that network naturally? Like, how did you make the decision?
Yeah, at first I dabbled, and then I started to get really into it. And, I sold 51% of my company to Live Nation a few years ago, and they pushed me to do it too. So I think that's great.
And why did they what was that conversation?
Because listen, people always want to grow the next generation of entrepreneurs. And if I could be a part of that and help turn the needle for them, it's great for me. It's a win-win situation.
And so as you're building various companies, how much trouble do you have finding talent?
That's a great question. So we try to promote within, of course, because they already know your DNA and everything that you're about. To career path somebody within your company is the greatest thing you could do. It shows the rest of the team that you're growing and there's scalability inside your company. And as great as I am, if people think they can't grow in my company, they're going to leave. It's not even about the money. It's just people want to be able to grow. So career pathing within. And then, of course, by being in Miami, when everyone's escaped out of all the other cities, we were able to get some great talent.
And so let's talk a little bit more, if we can, as we wind down a little bit about the stuff you're doing this weekend, because the world has arrived on your doorstep, or at least the F1 world has arrived on your doorstep. How do you go about figuring out what a cool thing will be? You know, leveraging the place, leveraging your experience, knowing the audience that's coming in. How do you sort of imagine what you're going to do?
So for me, I'm a long ball player, guys. So this year, I turned down 1 million events, all these extra events going on. I really wanted to see how the landscape worked out this year to really kind of figure it out before I just said, okay, I'll do this party and that party and this and this and this. Plus, we have so many venues, Live Story, Poppy Steak, Swan Commode, all these places. So I decided this year to really focus on our venues and making sure we have the greatest people at all of them, and we have all the corporate stuff there. And then we're doing the 72 Club at F1, where we have all our food and beverage brands for all the suite holders to be able to eat. Then right before a month ago, I get a call saying, would you co-host a garage with Stefano, the president of F1? And I was like, I don't know, but it sounded so cool to have a garage next to the Mercedes-Benz pit on the track and be able to bring my friends to and really create a unique experience. Then I was all in.
I love the fact that, like, you've done this for so long and you're like, I don't know. Like, next to the Mercedes pit, okay.
Yeah, that was like, first I was like, oh, another event, no. And they're like, before you say no, why don't you just listen to what we're asking you to do? I'm like, okay. It sounds good.
And so what have you learned? I know we still have, qualifying in the race, but what have you learned so far about this crowd or this scene?
So there are a lot of people who are trying to do these gigantic events off-site, like in this warehouse and that warehouse, and you'll probably see some of that. But a lot of those people, I think, for this first year might get hurt because you may not have as much general admission people as you do just the high-end people. So again, I wanted to just see how it goes this year, and then on Monday our team will get together and we'll figure out what we should try to attack for the following year.
So it's interesting, not to get too into the weeds, but I know that this is a crowd that thinks about these things. You mentioned sort of how the geography and the demographics of Miami have changed. The race is not in downtown Miami or even, along the beach. It's out, by Hard Rock. What does that say about kind of the shifting the landscape, as it were, of Miami? And how do you think about that as a business person going forward?
I mean, just by having a club at the Hard Rock with Steve Ross, knowing that the city of Miami said, no, we can't do F1. And Steve Ross said, well, I'm doing it myself. You got to give him some credit, guys. It's kind of incredible, right? He said, all right, I'll do it myself. And he fought and he did it. And the fact that him and Tom Garfinkel brought this to life is the most incredible thing for Miami. And we owe him so much respect for this. It's incredible that he pulled this off himself.
And it's interesting, this is
It's not like he's in Saudi Arabia and they're like, we'll do it. No, this guy is doing it himself.
Yeah, and for and signing up for 10 years.
Yeah,
right? I mean that's a long term.
What a guy.
So what do you?
Table minimums.
As you think about, not just this weekend, but everything that's happened recently. There's market volatility. There's inflation. There's all these different things going on. The politics that we mentioned earlier. What worries you at this point as a business person?
Just about a lot of people are taking a pause on VC right now for the next few months to try to see how the world shakes up. So I think you're going to see all these like crazy valuations come down, obviously, because capital is going to dry up a little bit for these people. So I think that's concerning to me, and the market's a little concerning, obviously, right now. I think you just have to strap up and go with what you have. You're not going to be able to remaneuver everything right now. But I hope it doesn't stop the entrepreneurial mentality. That's what I'm more nervous than anything.
So you're in the hospitality business, you entertain people for a living. What's your best advice for this crew on how to survive and thrive this weekend in Miami?
I think just make your reservations, guys. and you just have to pay. No, I'm joking. No, it's just know this, that try to get your reservations in there as early as possible, right? And I think just take it in. Miami's such a great city. Really see the flavor of the city. And not everything is something you have to pay for. The beach, the weather. What a great weekend we're having, and I'm so excited that you guys are here. It's gonna be amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Please welcome to the stage Evil Geniuses CEO Nicole LaPointe Jameson and Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabisaja.
It's still bumping. It is very much. Nicole and I coordinated, clearly. Nicole, thanks so much for being here. This is great. I mean, it completely makes sense why we're talking about esports in conjunction with this F1 event. Can you just take a step back and maybe paint the picture for us, just how big esports has grown in the past few years?
Very much so, and thanks Jennifer and Bloomberg for having me. So for those that are completely unfamiliar, esports is the best way to think of us is like a university athletics department. We're one brand with many teams under us that play instead of Michigan with basketball or football. We are Evil Geniuses with League of Legends and Dota. And so what that begets is a very large scale, from a global reach perspective, teams that have fans across the globe, because the player bases of these games, like many traditional sports, is in the millions. And so we kind of live in that intersection of being a digital product that intersects with sports and entertainment.
And when we look at the numbers specifically, Nicole, I mean, it's boomed over the past 2 years. Can you break down a little bit of that for us?
Well, the esports industry is about to hit a little over $1 billion in terms of revenue, much of which comes from traditional sports style revenue streams. But especially during the pandemic, when a lot of the world went online and at home, the esports and gaming, the mental prototype that someone might have had for what is this space, who is part of this space, broadened. Because it's really how Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and young millennials connect with many people and socialize. And it's not just one type of person that participates in the breadth of gaming. It is truly like fashion or music, very diverse, very digital, very inclusive.
And when we talk about people coming into the industry, I think it's important for people to know you were in private equity prior to this, and you decided to transition into gaming. Why? What was sort of your thought process?
My parents ask the same thing every day. No, so I was in private equity, worked distressed asset turnarounds, which maybe doesn't bode well for coming into EG after that. But Evil Geniuses came to us as an investment, and at the time, like many esports organizations, even as recent as 3 to 5 years ago, were underfunded and not well professionalized from a business point of view. Many esports organizations started as pure entertainment or even players running the org like EG. And so the infrastructure to make a scalable business beyond just a passion play of a sport was really needed. And so I came into EG 3 years ago, actually this week, and really I tease my team, I'm the steak, they're all the sizzle. So I make sure the lights stay on and things work and we can really build and grow. But the reason why this was interesting to me was not the title, it's very much the opportunity of esports in capturing the eyes, hearts, and wallets of young global audiences is a space that traditional media and entertainment, traditional sports that are aging up and out and struggle with limited geo-affiliation. These are problems that everyone's trying to solve, so being able to be at the forefront of those challenges is incredible.
Well, considering that and considering your background, how did you approach then the industry as a whole? I mean, considering what you were just saying, traditional sports have had issues attracting young people. So what did you do with the business itself?
And I know it's annoying because it's a buzzword, but first and foremost, you have to be authentic. Everyone here especially, they're all experts around the Gen Z and young millennial consumer, right? They don't like being advertised to. They spend where their values are aligned. They don't so much care about what is local to them versus what is affordable or digitally accessible. And esports has a lot of those features, but unlike a sports team that is very beholden to a geo-affiliated fan or their win-loss record, we are able to create a brand among in containing all of what we do to excite and inspire and get young consumers and eyeballs to spend against a purpose-driven initiative, which is really exciting. And no one has it perfect. I've only been here 3 years, definitely don't have it perfect, but it's been exciting to really curate what is the modern era of entertainment.
Does it look differently around the world? I mean, where is sort of, how does it differ when you look at different cultures and sort of how people are engaging with gaming and in esports?
Very much so. I would say actually North America, despite having the most valuable consumer from an advertising perspective, as well as being popular, is the least popular region globally in terms of where esports is celebrated. You go to the APAC community, esports athletes are your modern day North American Beyoncés. They are known, celebrated, very mass proliferated in terms of awareness, and that trend is trickling westward. Especially recently, a lot of bigger developers have started franchising their games, which has led to better mass awareness in terms of what is esports, how do you participate, how do you understand. But the North American space is still growing, especially compared to the maturity you find in the EU or APAC regions.
For Evil Geniuses, what are the markets that you're paying attention to when you think about that?
So we're a little interesting in where we approach our target demographic of fans. Our competitive teams are focused on lifting trophies. And so most of those fans skew towards the broader demographics of who watches esports today. Skews young, skews male. And for us, skews North American. But where we've diversified and tried to bring in the broader group of who watches gaming, which in the North America region especially, 45% of gamers are women. But you wouldn't think that based on who's represented and shows up on the athletic side. So we've branched into doing also content creators, personalities, people that are focused not on being the best at the game, but being someone that you enjoy to watch on stream, on YouTube or other media distribution platforms. And with there, we've loved putting megaphones behind the true diversity of who participates in the gaming scene. We have women, we have non-binary individuals, we have comedians, we have fashion models, we have people that are grounded in gaming but are multi-hyphenate creators to reach that broader audience of who can participate in the gaming scene.
Do you think that's integral to the continued business growth for Evil Geniuses as a whole and also the talent that you bring in?
Very much so. If esports as a whole cannot get out of its own way and who is part of this community, we will not be as commercially successful or viable in the longer term. We have to capture the breadth of the fans that are there in a more organic and sticky way.
And let's talk more about that, especially when you think about the gaming community, and you mentioned sort of who is playing, who are the faces in front of and behind. I don't think it's any secret that there's been some issues with inclusion and diversity in terms of the gaming industry. I mean, has that changed just in the few years that you've been with Evil Geniuses? Not that you're the sole person who needs to change it, but you know.
I appreciate that. Yeah, the gaming space, no secret, historically has not been great for people that weren't of a certain type of demographic, especially in the US. But that doesn't have to be that way, but it does require investment and intentionality around why and what you do as a business. And myself, not being a white male, I take that really seriously. And for when we were rebuilding Evil Geniuses, making sure we're thoughtful, not just to check marketing boxes, but for a space that isn't solid yet. We need to find innovators and disruptors to bring this forward. And if like only hires like, you're not going to be innovating. So not only we care a lot about diversity from not only management experience and background. I have leaders from traditional sports to traditional entertainment to financial services, but even in-game and in our talent representation, how do we find diverse talent through empirical means, leveraging data, leveraging professional scouting versus a lot of historic gaming and esports, which was who you know was how you got in. I'm lucky that I have a board and investors that are aligned with that mission to support that, because it does take time. It's not the easier route, but that is where we found much of our fan loyalty success, as well as even our competitive success. EG is actually one of the only esports teams that's ever started mixed gender rosters in competitive play, considering this is not a gendered sport physically. And we're actually the leading esports team that has female, LGBTQ, and people of color followers, which are consumers everyone should care about.
Do brands respond to that then?
Very much so. I would say we're really lucky to have partners and sponsors, which is the main form of revenue for us, that tend to be more brand and value aligned, and our fans respond well to us. So it doesn't seem like an advertisement when we work with brands, because we make sure we integrate in a way that supports our mission and where we're going.
What does that look like when you partner with the brand? Can you just walk us through sort of how it works with the teams and with the players themselves?
So it's an interesting space. Part of the beauty, putting on my financial cap, of esports is from a talent representation perspective and management, we look more like music than traditional sports. The agency scene isn't well defined. We own more of our player rights. So when you sponsor or work with an esports organization, you get bespoke access to our players that you wouldn't get if you tried to work with an NBA player, for example. And so we've been able to be really creative on what are our partners' business goals, what are we trying to achieve, and do something really fun. A goofy example is LG, one of our partners, which is fantastic. We recently did a tournament series with them where we brought DJ Khaled and Megan Fox in to be coached by our coaches of our teams. It was a disaster. They were terrible. But what a fun thing to watch. And it was trending on the internet, of course, because it's an unexpected way to get LG's brand, their Ultra Gear monitors, out into the eyes and hearts of consumers in a fun way. Didn't feel like an ad, right? And so we can do that in a lot of different ways where young consumers respond better to that type of bespoke content, media type play.
And when we talk about partnerships as well, I think it's really interesting. Evil Genius has partnered with a Premier League team, Wolverhampton, which when you think about esports and traditional sports coming together, the demographic of Wolverhampton is a little bit different than I'm assuming what Evil Genius.
That is fair.
Right?
Whenever I'm in London, people make fun of me, so I'm sorry for those that are from the UK and are aware of Wolverhampton. But on the plus side, an English Premier League team they've been around since 1874, right? They know how to run a good athletics operation, which ironically enough is oftentimes the weak point of many esports teams in terms of their team side. So us having access and being able to bounce our playbook around how do you structure and build athletes and good humans in the space has been at the forefront of one of my priorities, and having an English Premier League team's infrastructure and guidance and network has been critical to accelerating that. What was also interesting is, as not one of the big three English Premier League teams, Wolves has strong fandom that tends to follow their players, right? Raul Jimenez is a Mexican player, big proportion of their Mexican fans are fans of him versus they were fans of Wolves before then. But esports is a little different, where of course we have players and of course there's fans of the players, but one of the things that keeps us up at night is we don't own the IP of what we play. So games come and go, players come and go. We have to, from the onset, be very aware of why is someone a fan of Evil Geniuses more than maybe one of our excellent players or creators, and that knowledge of someone being a fan of a franchise and what that franchise stands for. Almost every traditional sports team is trying to crack that nut, and that complement of knowledge has been really helpful on the back end of our partnership.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, what is it that the Wolverhampton is getting out of the deal itself? Right? Because they have a huge fan base.
Exactly. It's definitely the brand, top line brand knowledge, as well as North American young audiences. Many Premier League teams, if you're not kind of the big three, I think struggle getting young audiences to follow and get engaged, and we provide good knowledge, as well as one interesting thing is Wolverhampton Wanderers, owned by Fosun Sports Group. EG also has a very strong APAC presence. We're actually one of the most followed Western esports organizations in China. And so having good ability to activate, engage, and use their resources to localize and do joint activations is a really unparalleled opportunity for us.
Do you see the two existing sort of going forward traditional sports? I mean, now people are going to live events again, but during the pandemic, we saw people playing esports more than ever, tuning in. I mean, what do you sort of think is the future of these two things coexisting with one another?
I think you see it more and more, especially in the U.S. Many traditional sports franchises are looking to buy esports teams as another arm to engage their younger audiences and demographics. And during COVID, the pandemic, when people were not in arenas, traditional sports are measured by heads and seats in stadium. We are measured by eyeballs reach. We're a little bit like Facebook 10 years ago, right? Or Meta, bear with me. And so that ability where COVID, one of our partners previously was a sponsor of the Yankees, and was like, what do we do now? You should think about esports. And we were able to hit the same metrics in terms of fan engagement because we were more prepared to be digital and bring in different eyes to their brand. And so I definitely think the complement of learning will be important going forward as the space is expensive. Esports organizations and these athletes they're not minimum wage workers. They tend to make 6 to 7 figure salaries with multi-million-dollar prize pools on the line and viewership and eyes on them in the millions. So the scale and the professionalism that a lot of traditional sports franchises have of how to manage that scale is a good learning for us too.
Do you think we've hit peak? I mean, I'm always fascinated looking at teenagers or, some of these gamers who, as you mentioned, are making millions of dollars. Are we at the peak and it might come down? What do you think?
It's a controversial topic. I would say there will be definitely some correction as the space overall. There was, I would say, probably around the time of my entrance, a very big boom. There were a bajillion esports organizations run by people and kids seeing, oh, this is exciting and this is a business, I'll enter. That's consolidating, it is settling. There's probably less than 50 relevant esports organizations in the world today. And it's really those that were thoughtful around not just how to build a brand, but also how to build a business that scales with technology changes, with funding and being able to manage investors, things that maybe sound obvious to this group in the room, but were not obvious for the demographic of historic esports leaders. And so while the business continues to mature, a lot of these very outsized salaries will likely course correct as more developers realize the benefit of owning their league and going into the franchise system. That creates a closed market where salaries, again, will correct. But I think the reach and the excitement of esports from a volume perspective is just getting started.
What do you think the trajectory is for 2022? For esports? I mean, we're at, in Miami with the Formula One event happening right now. I mean, what does it look like sort of in the short term?
Oh, I think it's super exciting. There's especially because one of the biggest esports events in the world, Riot runs a game called League of Legends, and the League of Legends Championship Series is actually the third most popular sport for kids in the US under the age of 25. So sorry, hockey, sorry, baseball. League of Legends is here. Wow. The biggest event, the kind of our Super Bowl equivalent, and is also held in a North American roadshow this year. The first time it's not been held in APAC or EU for a bit of time, I want to say 4 or 5 years. And so for people to really see, right, a lot of this seems very conceptual, not material, not tangible. Like, what is esports, what am I getting? But to have access, especially in the North American region, to these events that bring hundreds of thousands of live attendees and millions of concurrent digital followers and viewers, that's something that most cities will realize and get very excited by and want to continue to support. Concurrently, too, in the collegiate scene, many US universities are investing in esports programs, whether it's sports analytics and esports teams and clubs, realizing it's a driver of recruitment. And so as universities and the academia also enter more into creating professional pipelines, the space will seem less spooky, less inaccessible, and more exciting as a traditional and stable career path.
How far out do you think we are from there? I didn't realize universities are...
I'd say probably the next 3 years, especially I believe Michigan is building a huge program around esports, and to have like a Big 30 school to go invest that heavily is really, really exciting. A good example too, I was recently in Austin, and the UT system, their esports club has over 3,000 students in it. It's one of their biggest intramural clubs. The school wasn't aware of that, and so making sure the awareness of there's people that have interest, and then how do you maximize the opportunity will just grow really quickly.
And Nicole, when it comes to success, I mean, how does Evil Genius measure success? How do you know that you're sort of on the right track? You mentioned, the industry might correct itself. How do you know that you're sort of headed in the right direction as there's more people coming in?
For sure. Well, if my board's listening, of course, financials. But it's really interesting because we blend as a sports team meets a media company, and so we have some elements, and a lot of our metrics, right, are around competitive performance. Because you don't have to be a winner to get a lot of the revenue streams that we have, but it definitely helps. It opens the door like a college degree, and so making sure we keep that pinnacle of athletic performance is top of mind. Of course, building a stable business is critical. And then cultural. We are in a unique position where we can shape the face of what and how young people view sports entertainment representation for them. And again, that's really exciting to help push a new narrative around it doesn't have to be the way that it was for your parents. And you can be seen and heard and part of this community, which helps us, right? The more people that want to be a part of esports and are aware of it and think positively of that, only helps us. So really that financial, cultural, and competitive top of mind.
And a lot of young people are seeing this as a viable career for themselves, right? Is that sort of a far-fetched idea, or you think there's a lot of opportunity in this?
Very much not. I think the misnomer or the misinformation around that is a lot of people are like, oh, I'll be an esports pro. That's kind of like saying, oh, I'm going to be a baseball star. Like you are the most excellent of the excellent, and that is a very hard career path, irrespective of the field that you're in. But what I'm very excited is people are realizing, oh, I'm great at sponsorship sales. There's paths for esports in that. Or I'm an excellent accountant. I can go in esports. Or I love being a brand marketer and exciting audiences with new demographics. You can work in esports. The back office infrastructure awareness as real career paths is just as exciting, to me at least, again, being a boring private equity person. It's just as exciting as going pro or being aware that pro is a path. But the more we can break down the curve, the better. A funny anecdote, one of our absolute superstar players, Rookie of the Year, when we called his parents, he was 16 at the time, we wanted to recruit him for our upcoming season, called his parents. He's like the best in the world at this game.
This is like the NFL draft a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And we called his parents, like, we want to sign JoJo to our team in League of Legends, like, comes a salary, 401k, we'd move him, we'd house him, like explaining what we do. And his parents were literally like, wait, is that what he does on the computer all day? They had no idea their son was like the Kobe Bryant of League of Legends. And to just continue to build that awareness and awareness of stability, and like, he's probably out earning his entire family right now, as we just won our current, the US Spring Split Championships with him. So just finding those opportunities to build that this is real, this is an opportunity is great.
And even in when you think of the game itself and designing of the game, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Very much so.
Yeah. All right, Nicole, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Please welcome to the stage Founders Fund General Partner Keith Raboy and Bloomberg's Shonali Bosick.
Keith, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
You know, many of you may know Keith had moved here to Miami in the middle of the pandemic, and ever since then has been one of the biggest advocates for the city. And I'm wondering, when you look at Miami versus San Francisco versus New York, what's the opportunity here to invest, to draw talent? What is the opportunity set?
It's really simple. It's the future versus the past. San Francisco's Detroit, and Miami's the future. It's the future of finance. It's the future of technology. It took a pandemic and other macro events to catalyze that, but Miami is by far the best city with the most optimistic outlook, with the best government and the most happy people in the United States, certainly. And entrepreneurs, investors are no different than humans. You know, humans have been the same since Shakespeare. And it finally clarified and linked in my brain that, you know, entrepreneurs, technologists, designers, engineers want to be happy too. And we're just going to take all the happy people and move them here.
The happy people. It's getting to be a tough investing environment, and if you think about who's moving here, so many entrepreneurs. So what is the next set of opportunities that you see that people are going to be able to build businesses, raise money, and still make it through this cycle?
So, you know, I primarily invest in early stage companies, which means that I really care about things 5, 10 years in the future. We do run both a growth fund and a venture fund in parallel at Founders Fund. And so the growth fund obviously has to think in different time horizons, think 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 years out. And that's more affected by, turmoil in the current public markets. But if you're starting a company today, what's going on in the public markets really doesn't matter. If anything, it's actually easier to build an early stage company when there's turmoil in late stage companies and private and public companies. My first professional opportunity in tech was really PayPal. We built PayPal realistically 2000, 2001, and 2002. About as difficult an economic environment, at least in technology, that we've ever seen. And we did our IPO actually in February of 2002, which I wouldn't recommend, but it's certainly possible. Netflix also IPO'd that year and has done pretty well since. So I think it's actually easier to marshal a critical density of talent when you're recruiting. You're not recruiting against every company being funded on the planet and every company with metrics that seem allegedly to go up and to the right. So right now is a great time to build.
Where are the cracks in the market? Because you are starting to see some startups finally start to pursue layoffs. You are seeing more stories come to the fore. So how do you avoid some of those downturns that we might see?
Well, the downturns are real, and the disadvantage or advantage of being in a portfolio, we have a portfolio of probably 120 companies, is most of this stuff, we sort of see months before it hits the public domain. We have companies that are trying to raise money and having difficulty. We have companies that get term sheets from people where other investors walk away. So we see all this stuff in our portfolio, and then therefore we can give advice and counsel to the entrepreneurs I work with so that they can avoid these kind of mistakes and unnecessary issues. Typically, entrepreneurs have a lot of leverage at their control around burn, hiring, pace of hiring, marketing spend, payback time. And so in these type of environments, you have to be more disciplined. You can't just spend money frivolously. Maybe you shouldn't ever be hiring or spending money frivolously, but lots of people do that. And when money is cheap, when the cost of capital feels like it's the cost of oxygen and free, people lean in and maybe lean in too aggressively. We've been pretty conservative as a fund in the last 6 to 9 months. I've been pretty conservative as a board member in terms of giving advice and counsel for probably the last 1 to 2 years. And so I think hopefully our companies in our portfolio will do better than on average.
This is an environment that so many entrepreneurs have never seen in their lives, inflationary environments, and also the rate rises that we're about to see. It's going to be harder to raise money by definition. And so what are some of the things that they need to be aware of from years of experience in this business? They've never been here before.
So I'll give you a very tangible acid test that I always use, and sometimes my friends, colleagues make fun of me because I'm so addicted to this. I think every business should have a tight payback cycle. So whatever you spend in marketing, let's say, you need to have a tight time frame when you pay that back. And that's the acid test of whether you have a good business, whether you really have product market fit. And I've applied that through hot markets, cold markets, cool markets, and it works. Sometimes you feel a little old or conservative in a very hot market when you're telling people they have to pay back their marketing expenses, in 9 months. And sometimes entrepreneurs look at you and say, well, this person over there said that's not that important, but I've used this for 20 years and it works really well. So no, it doesn't require radical changes. If you can build a business that will grow 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x year to year and have a payback time of 6 to 9 months, there's always people who will fund that.
There's a lot of news out there about the payback time for a Twitter buyout. And the idea of if Elon Musk takes it private, when does it go back out into the market? And you have exposure to Elon Musk through SpaceX at the Founders Fund. What do you think of one of the biggest leveraged buyouts in history led by Elon?
Well, Elon's the quintessential N of one. We have this phrase, Founders Fund, called N of one entrepreneurs. So we're in the business of finding those N of ones and convincing them to take our money as opposed to other people's money. We've done a pretty good job at it. We funded SpaceX back as early as Founders Fund started. So I think that's 2008. We probably are carrying multiple billions of dollars of exposure in SpaceX, and we even reinvested in the last round. So we like high conviction, doubling down. Elon, is one of a kind. So I'm pretty confident that whatever he does will work. We are not going to probably be able to legally invest in this, but in some ways I wish we could.
So why do you wish you could? What do you think happens in the next couple of years under Elon's leadership, and what ramifications does that have for what he says he wants to create, free speech?
Well, Founders Fund believes in free speech. We have a brand that represents free speech, and we're probably as unequivocal about it as any VC, certainly on the planet. And so, we support his agenda. From a financial perspective, I think it would be a bad idea for many people to take over this company while they're running for other companies. However, as I said, there's special people in the world. Steve Jobs was CEO technically of Apple and Pixar at the same time. They both had pretty good rides. So it's doable. It's just not doable for normal humans. But Elon's not normal, and so we tend to be in the business of backing non-normal people.
Would you put Jack Dorsey back in the seat?
I don't know. I don't know the details of how some of the decisions that were anti-free speech were made. Probably not if he was involved in, suspending the account of Trump, suspending the account of the New York Post, which is completely indefensible, suppressing criticism of the CCP, which is absolutely indefensible.
So speaking of free speech and the idea of politicization here, that you have groups of the country that are sparring, that are on completely different sides of reality in so many ways. When we look at what's happening here in Florida, the parental rights and education bill, how are your own employees reacting to this? And how do you create a space where all of those opinions can exist?
Well, amazingly, in Miami and Florida, people do this all the time, every day. So Miami is a very divided city. Roughly half the people here voted for Trump, roughly half voted for Biden. On any issue in Florida, you're going to run into, at any cocktail party, dinner party, work environment, you're going to run into people that have different views. And guess what? You learn to live, and you learn to debate and discuss things civilly and interestingly, and you learn stuff. So it's a good model for the rest of America, but it doesn't come up as a confrontational issue in Miami and Florida because people here have brothers, sisters, family members, and colleagues that have different views literally on every topic, including that bill.
Are you concerned that the bill would draw away talent and keep talent from coming here in any regard?
No, my husband and I are gay, we have 2 kids, and we're very happy with the bill. We completely endorse it.
So what about the way that the governor has addressed the bill with Disney also? This was supposed to be a pro-business state. So the way you're seeing politics and business play out, how do you think that continues?
Well, I think if companies are going to take sides on political issues, there's going to be, reactions to that. Typically, most companies are savvy and avoid getting on the middle, of a controversial issue explicitly. Disney has special rights, or has had historically special rights in Florida. You could argue nobody should have special rights as a company. As a libertarian conservative, I actually think all companies should probably be treated equally and not granted special rights anyway. However, if companies are going to engage in partisan tactics, they're going to pay the price for that.
So how, as a board member, do you also advise companies on how to navigate the political landscape out there, especially as now you see the potential rollback of Roe v. Wade also impacting employees?
I think I just send them a copy of Brian Armstrong's memo at Coinbase. Unfortunately, I like when other people do the work for me. I love sending blog posts that other people have written that are instructive.
So speaking of Brian Armstrong, as early to PayPal, you were early to the change that the financial system saw. What does crypto do?
I don't know. And if anybody knows, anybody tells you they absolutely know is either lying or naive, and those are not great. I do think there's potential really interesting implications of crypto, and we do invest in crypto. As a fund, we invested in Bitcoin directly in as early as probably 2014, 13. We now, have found other companies where we believe there's alpha. I sit on the board of a crypto-oriented company called Royal, which is reinventing the music industry. So we're embracing crypto where it is an ingredient that enables a new value proposition that will resonate with a large set of customers. Crypto is, interestingly, Bitcoin particularly, has not historically served as a hedge against inflation or a hedge against NASDAQ performance. So that's kind of interesting because you would, at least you could make a top-down case that it should have and would have, but it hasn't. But we're exploring, so we're making a lot of investments in crypto. Miami also is a great place to invest in crypto. The entire eastern seaboard in the United States, New York and Miami, are really the center of innovation in crypto. There's almost nothing happening on the West Coast in crypto anymore.
That's interesting because also if you look at the most recent sell-off, and you use the word crypto and not just Bitcoin, you've invested in Bitcoin, but the sell-off in Bitcoin has been worse than you've seen in Ethereum this time around. So do you start to look elsewhere in crypto?
We have been for about the last 18 months. We might have been a year slow. I think with the benefit of hindsight, we probably should have at least a year before that. But we were more like Bitcoin maximalists for a long time at Founders Fund.
So that's changing now.
It has definitely changed.
So what does that push you into and push towards?
Well, we're not trying to find the latest, coolest, newest thing. As I said, we're Founders Fund, which means we need to find the best new founder. And those founders will steer us to the right place. That's our thesis. That's our competitive differentiation. So I don't really care about what I'm investing in other than, is this founder capable of changing the world or changing an industry, which is very rare and very unusual and almost like heroic.
You know, it's interesting because when people talk about cryptocurrency, they talk a lot about the place in the world that the U.S. has, the place in the world that Miami has. And I'm curious as to how that plays out while regulations are getting sorted out.
Yeah, so it is interesting. There are, more regulatory favorable environments for crypto in the U.S. Wyoming, has set a precedent, sort of like Delaware did back in the day in incorporation, and that's the reason why everybody's a Delaware corp to this day. So there probably is some competitive nature to regulation, and I think one of the things that remote work and COVID has clarified is that all states, all city governments are going to have to compete for talent, and that we're basically customers now. And so I think you're going to see this in crypto as well. Crypto people are very mobile, even maybe compared to regular entrepreneurs.
Let's talk about talent for a second here, because Miami, on one hand, yes, a lot of young people are moving here. On the other hand, prices are rising a lot, and there's a lot of questions about the school system here. And are there enough schools for people in New York to put their kids in schools here? How are you seeing that debate play out, and what the future looks like in terms of the investment in schools and in younger talent?
There's significant investment both in the private and public sector in schools particularly. Obviously, not everything has a very tight lead time. Some things you have to invest ahead of the curve to get the supply when you need it. Schools and to some extent real estate have lead and lagging signals, but the favorability of the legislation in Florida is about as flexible as it gets in terms of innovation around education. So dollars can flow with the parent's choice to different types of schools. There's been charter schools that have been started already just to focus on tech talent. The mayor, I believe, announced 2. I'm sure there's more, where the graduates of these high schools will be qualified to work at Facebook, Google, Apple, any of my companies. So we're innovating constantly here in education. So I think you'll see there's another company I'm involved in that I don't think has announced this yet, but is innovating in Miami that will be releasing some cool, new, interesting homeschool-like environments. So there is actually innovation going on that will allow the talent to migrate here with school. So it depends where they're moving from. New York has a lot of elite schools. San Francisco really doesn't. So if you're moving people from San Francisco, which a lot of people, I run a company as a part-time job as CEO, and I have like 80 employees, most of whom moved from the Bay Area. When I'm moving those parents, it's really easy to find them schools here compared to San Francisco. I admit that the high end of the private school infrastructure in New York is pretty interesting, although it's decaying. But we're going to create new options here. I'm working on some things as a side project on my own to create new opportunities in education.
And you could feel it. You are definitely in and around town, constantly meeting with innovators. You talked about this. You're working 9 to 9.
It depends what you include in work, but yeah, often. This week, certainly.
Yeah, so what does that mean in terms of the future of work? I mean, how does it all need to be done here, or can you be living in Denver working for a company in Miami?
I think it depends. My view as an investor and CEO is to build a company from scratch. Literally the proverbial 2 kids in the garage. Reorienting the entire industry needs to be done in person for a very long period of time. I think unstructured learning, osmosis-based learning, is very critical early in your career and early in your company building trajectory, and no one's created a substitute for that online. I think there are times when either people's career trajectory changes and is more predictable, and the company's product roadmap and evolution is more predictable, where you might be able to mix in different work styles and successfully.
We've talked about Twitter, we've talked about SpaceX, we've talked about PayPal. If you look at the investments you're making today and the investments you're about to make tomorrow, what are you most excited about? What is going to be the next big company of the next generation?
Well, I'm a little biased because I serve as CEO of a company, and so I'm voting with my feet to spend multiple days a week, as CEO. It's called Open Store. It's based in Miami. We have 80 employees, all in person in Miami, and we're reinventing e-commerce. So no one really in the Western world has reinvented e-commerce since eBay, Amazon, and arguably Google. Shopify's had a nice run at being the next generation of e-commerce. But if you look in the Western world compared to the innovation in the East, it's been pretty barren. And so we're going to reinvent e-commerce here. And that's what we've been working on. So what we do today is we provide liquidity to long-tail Shopify merchants. So let's say you start a Shopify merchant, store and you no longer want to run it, you don't have to run it forever or shut it down. We'll buy it from you, give you instant liquidity, and then we'll stitch all these stores together.
So you're taking on Amazon?
A better version of Amazon retail.
How do you do that?
By buying up all the coolest inventory. Supply. It's like Netflix. If you have the best supply, none of the stores we buy sell on Amazon.
So, I mean, what does this mean for, I mean, Amazon is the giant in the room, right? I mean, these companies have gotten just so big. Do you compete with them vis-a-vis the fact that they might be regulated more in the future?
No, I think a lot of people, certainly in politics in DC, and my husband and I spend a decent amount of time talking to politicians, people overrate how much power Amazon has. I'm perfectly happy competing with Amazon. I'm perfectly happy to give other entrepreneurs money. I don't really worry about what Amazon does. I got to worry about what we do, and that's very difficult. But we have 60,000 SKUs, none of which are available on Amazon today. As long as those SKUs are not available on Amazon, shoppers aren't going to go to Amazon.
But how much does that have to do, and I think about this a lot because the creator economy in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of room for creators when the economy was easy. But the economy is getting tougher. So what money are people going to have to spend on these new creators?
It is a good question whether these are discretionary purchases and how much substitution there is in a recession. I did see some e-commerce stats today about, Shopify grew 16%, Amazon's down about 3%, Etsy's up about 3%, so Wayfair's down about 14%. So there is some evidence that consumers are being more conservative in their expenditures. That said, sometimes there's a substitution effect from like higher end pristine goods to new creator goods. So we may see some substitution that might actually be a positive. It's hard to tell though. If we're in a macro, recession, borderline depression, it's gonna be hard to build any kind of e-commerce business.
1 minute left, last question. You heading to F1?
Of course. Not today. I'm missing it for this, but I'll be there Saturday and Sunday.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. That
Pleasure.
closes us up, guys. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. We hope you enjoyed the conversations. Thank you so much to our speakers, the moderators. You can go back and look at the interviews on BloombergLive.com. And thank you so much to our sponsor, Crypto.com, for making all of this possible. And if you'd like more information from our sponsors, please visit the resources tab on the event website. Join us on May 17th in London for Bloomberg Invest. It's a focus on Africa, the summit in May 25th in Raleigh for intelligent automation, the Creating the Workforce of the Future briefing, or on June 8th in San Francisco for Bloomberg Technology. And if you can't join in person, all of these events will be virtual for the viewing. And for more details, please visit and register on BloombergLive.com. And thank you guys so much for being such an engaged audience.